The morning sun glinted off the Pacific waves at Oceanside Beach, California. Kate Winslow knelt in the sand, her slender fingers carefully arranging seashells in her collection basket. At 39, she maintained a natural beauty that required little enhancement. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face free of makeup, save for a light touch of mascara on her long lashes. Her blue jeans and faded navy sweatshirt from the Camp Pendleton Community Center where she volunteered were hardly fashionable, but they suited her unpretentious nature. To casual observers, she was just another local enjoying the peaceful morning shoreline. No one would guess she was the art teacher who had become a beloved fixture at the military base's community center, teaching children of deployed servicemen how to express their emotions through painting and sculpture. Kate paused, her sharp eyes catching something unusual in the sand ahead, a dark stain too red to be seaweed. She set down her basket and moved forward cautiously. The morning joggers and early surfers paid her no mind as she followed what was unmistakably a trail of blood droplets leading toward a cluster of large rocks at the far end of the beach. "Hello," she called out, receiving only the reply of crashing waves. As she rounded the largest boulder, Kate's breath caught in her throat. A young Marine in PT gear lay crumpled against the rock, clutching his side. Blood seeped between his fingers, staining the sand beneath him, a dark crimson. "Sir, can you hear me?" Kate was at his side instantly, her casual demeanor vanishing like morning mist. She moved with practiced precision, checking his pulse and assessing the wound. The Marine, barely out of his 20s, looked up with pain-clouded eyes. Ambushed, jogging, knife. Kate's movements betrayed no panic as she pulled off her sweatshirt, revealing a simple white t-shirt underneath. With expert hands, she folded the sweatshirt into a pressure bandage. "Apply pressure here," she instructed, guiding his hand. "What's your name, Marine?" "Corporal James Dixon," he managed through gritted teeth. Kate pulled a phone from her pocket and dialed not 911, but a direct number. "This is Catherine Winslow. I need immediate medical assistance at the north end of Oceanside Beach. Marine corporal with a stab wound approximately 5 inches below the right rib cage, conscious, but losing blood." "Yes, I've applied pressure. 20 minutes is too long. Make it 10. She hung up and turned her attention back to the wounded man. From her pocket, she produced a small kit that seemed too professional for a casual beachcomber. She extracted medical gloves, gauze, and a small bottle of antiseptic. "Corporal Dixon, I need to check the wound. This will hurt." As she carefully lifted his hand away, revealing a deep knife wound, Dixon watched her face with increasing confusion. "You're not just a civilian, are you, ma'am?" Kate's lips formed a small, enigmatic smile. "Today, I'm just your good Samaritan. Now, hold still." Her hands moved with the confidence of a combat medic as she cleaned and properly dressed the wound. Within minutes, she had established an effective field dressing that slowed the bleeding significantly. "How did you learn to do this?" Dixon asked, his breathing steadier now. "Red Cross training," she answered simply, though something in her eyes suggested a more complex truth. In the distance, a military ambulance's siren wailed. Kate helped Dixon into a more comfortable position, then gathered her things with quick efficiency. "Wait," he called as she stepped away. "Who are you?" Kate paused. "Just Kate Winslow. I teach art at the base community center." "No, ma'am," Dixon insisted, his military training making him observant even in pain. "You just field-dressed a combat wound like a force recon medic." Kate's expression remained pleasantly neutral. "The ambulance is almost here. You'll be fine, Corporal." She disappeared around the rocks just as the ambulance pulled up to the beach access point. When the corpsmen reached Dixon, they found him stabilized with a professional-grade field dressing and clear indications of what care had been administered. "Who helped you, Corporal?" one of the medics asked, as they transferred him to a stretcher. She said her name was Kate Winslow, the art teacher. The two corpsmen exchanged a knowing look, but said nothing more. 30 minutes later, Kate walked through the gates of Camp Pendleton Naval Base, nodding familiarly to the guards, who waved her through without requesting ID. As she passed one of the guards, Sergeant Major Frank Miller watched her with a particularly attentive gaze. At 67, Miller was a decorated veteran of Desert Storm who had refused retirement to continue serving in a civilian capacity. Kate caught his eye and nodded with slightly more deference than she showed the other guards. Miller returned the gesture with a subtle touch to his cap, a sign of respect that might seem odd between a senior NCO and a civilian art teacher. The brief exchange lasted only seconds, but an observant onlooker might have noticed an unspoken understanding passing between them. Kate made her way to the medical facility, her basket of seashells still in hand, now covered with a light jacket to hide the bloodstains on her shirt. Outside the emergency treatment area, she found Rear Admiral Thompson waiting. At 64, Thompson was a living legend among the SEALs, with distinguished service dating back to Desert Storm. His weathered face and steel-gray hair spoke of decades of command, while the slight limp in his right leg hinted at sacrifices made for his country. "Ms. Winslow," he acknowledged her with unusual formality, his voice carrying the gravitas of command. "Admiral," she responded, equally formal. "How is Corporal Dixon? Stable?" The doctor says whoever treated him in the field knew exactly what they were doing. Thompson studied her face. "Dixon says an art teacher saved his life." Kate shrugged. "I found him while collecting shells. Basic first aid." "Basic first aid," Thompson repeated his tone, making it clear he didn't believe her. "That was a precision knife wound from a Spetsnaz pattern blade, not your typical oceanside mugging." Kate's casual demeanor faltered for just a moment. "Russian," Thompson nodded, then glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. "Walk with me." They moved away from the medical building toward a quieter area of the base. Marines and sailors who passed by nodded respectfully to the Admiral, while many offered warm greetings to Kate. She was clearly well-liked among the base personnel. "We've intercepted chatter," Thompson said in a low voice once they were alone. "The kind we haven't heard since Kandahar in 2012. Dormant assets being activated. Old codes coming back online." Kate's face remained impassive, but her eyes hardened. "Why tell me this, Admiral?" "Because 3 days ago, Colonel Pierce took command of base security. The same Colonel Pierce who was mysteriously absent during the ambush in Kandahar that nearly killed 30 of our men." Thompson's voice carried decades of suspicion. "And now his wife is running the Base Community Programs Committee that oversees your art classes." Kate absorbed this information, her mind clearly working behind her calm exterior. "Dixon wasn't random," Thompson continued. "He was part of the security detail that discovered unauthorized communications equipment in the East Sector last week, before Pierce could shut down the investigation." "I see," Kate said softly. "Do you?" Thompson's piercing gaze sought confirmation. "Because if what I suspect is happening is real, we're all in danger, especially those who know too much about what happened in 2012. Kate finally met his eyes directly. "Thank you for the information, Admiral. I should clean up before my afternoon class." As she turned to leave, Thompson called after her, "Kate, he's coming home. 3 days." She froze momentarily, then continued walking without acknowledging the Admiral's words. But the slight straightening of her shoulders told Thompson all he needed to know. Kate made her way to the community center, entering through the back door to avoid being seen in her blood-stained clothes. In the small staff bathroom, she meticulously washed away every trace of Corporal Dixon's blood from her hands and changed into the spare clothes she kept in her locker. As she exited the bathroom, she nearly collided with Veronica Pierce, a tall, immaculately dressed woman of 47, whose perfect blonde coiffure and designer clothes seemed out of place in the modest community center. "Ms. Winslow," Veronica said, her voice dripping with barely concealed contempt. "I've been looking for you." "Mrs. Pierce," Kate acknowledged with a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "How can I help you?" "The committee has reviewed your art program budget," Veronica said, handing over a folder. "We've made some necessary cuts." Kate opened the folder, scanning the document inside. 50% reduction across all supplies, and a reassignment of her classroom to the far end of the building, away from the main activity areas. "These cuts will make it difficult to serve all the children in the program," Kate said evenly. "Perhaps if fewer officers' wives complained about you spending extra time with their husbands under the guise of parent consultations, we might find more value in your program." Veronica's perfectly manicured nails tapped against her crossed arms. Kate's expression remained neutral. "I consult with all parents about their children's progress." "I'm sure you do," Veronica smiled venomously, "just as I'm sure your special attention to the newly deployed officers' families is purely professional." Kate met the woman's gaze steadily. "It seems you've made up your mind about me, Mrs. Pierce." "Indeed I have, and I'm not alone." Veronica leaned closer. "My husband thinks you don't quite belong here either. Says something about you doesn't add up." For a split second, something dangerous flickered in Kate's eyes. A cold, predatory calculation that was entirely at odds with her gentle art teacher persona. Her fingers twitched almost imperceptibly, as if muscle memory was urging her toward a response her conscious mind quickly suppressed. The momentary lapse in her carefully constructed facade might have gone unnoticed by most, but Veronica caught it, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Your husband has excellent instincts," Kate replied with a cryptic smile, her composure instantly restored. "Will that be all?" Veronica seemed momentarily thrown by Kate's calm response. "For now, but I'll be watching you, Ms. Winslow." As Veronica strutted away, Kate's smile faded. She slipped the budget folder into her bag and made her way to her classroom, where children would soon arrive for their afternoon session. Throughout the class, Kate was the picture of patience and encouragement as she helped young children channel their emotions about deployed parents into art projects. No one would have guessed that just hours earlier she had treated a combat wound with expert precision, or that her mind was racing with the implications of Thompson's warning. As the children worked, Kate noticed Colonel Pierce passing by the classroom door, pausing to observe her with narrowed eyes. She pretended not to notice, helping a 7-year-old girl mix colors for her painting. The class ended at 1600 hours, and Kate spent another 30 minutes cleaning up before heading to the administrative building for a scheduled committee meeting. As she approached, she heard raised voices from an office, with the door slightly ajar. "Need access to the communications center by Friday. No exceptions," came Colonel Pierce's clipped tone. "For what purpose exactly?" a voice responded in thickly accented English. Kate slowed her pace, positioning herself to glance through the crack in the door. Inside, Colonel Pierce, a square-jawed man in his early 50s, with a perfectly pressed uniform, stood facing a civilian in an expensive suit. The civilian's back was to the door, but his accent was unmistakably Russian. "The purpose is classified, Volkov. Your job is to install the equipment, not ask questions." "My employers require specifics, Colonel, especially when the equipment being installed can intercept all base communications." Kate quietly extracted her phone and, without looking at the screen, positioned it to capture photos of the meeting. She took several shots in quick succession, then continued past the door as if she had merely been walking by. In the ladies' room, Kate locked herself in a stall and examined the photos. They clearly showed Colonel Pierce with a man whose face matched FSB operative Mikhail Volkov, according to the facial recognition software that shouldn't have been on a civilian art teacher's phone. Kate sent the images through an encrypted channel, then deleted them from her device and cleared the cache. By the time she exited the restroom, her phone appeared to be nothing more than what any normal art teacher might carry. The committee meeting was exactly what Kate expected, a systematic dismantling of her program under the guise of budget constraints. Veronica Pierce led the charge, suggesting that perhaps the community center didn't need an art program at all. Many of our officers feel that more practical activities would better serve our families, Veronica said, looking directly at Kate. Perhaps something with more discipline. Art provides children a crucial emotional outlet, while their parents are deployed, Kate countered calmly. The program has received excellent feedback from military psychologists. Yes, well, psychology isn't exactly a hard science, is it? Veronica smiled coldly. My husband believes in measurable results, Ms. Winslow, something your finger painting doesn't provide. Kate noticed several committee members shifting uncomfortably. Not everyone shared Veronica's obvious vendetta. If I may, interjected Captain Sarah Rodriguez, a logistics officer with 2 children in Kate's program. My oldest son stopped having nightmares after attending Ms. Winslow's classes. That's measurable enough for me. Veronica's smile tightened. How touching. But anecdotes aren't data. Actually, Kate said, pulling a folder from her bag, I've maintained comprehensive tracking of behavioral improvements reported by parents and teachers. 87% of children show reduced anxiety symptoms after 8 weeks in the program. She distributed copies of a professional-looking report that shouldn't have been within the capabilities of a simple art teacher to produce. As the committee members reviewed the data, Veronica's face darkened. Where did you get the resources to compile this? I have a background in child psychology, Kate answered smoothly. Before teaching art. It wasn't exactly a lie, though her background had more to do with analyzing patterns of children's trauma in conflict zones than traditional clinical psychology. The meeting ended with Kate's program intact, though with reduced funding. As she gathered her things, Veronica approached fury barely contained behind her plastic smile. This isn't over, Winslow. I don't know what game you're playing, but no one makes a fool of me. Kate regarded her calmly. No game, Mrs. Pierce. Just trying to help the children. The way you help their fathers, Veronica hissed. Everyone knows what you really are. Again, Kate felt that dangerous impulse rise within her, the instinct to neutralize a threat that had been honed through years of high-stakes operations. Her breathing remained controlled, but her eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly as she mentally catalogued 4 different ways to incapacitate Veronica using only the pen in her hand. The calculations happened automatically, muscle memory from a life Veronica couldn't begin to imagine. Instead, Kate's eyes flickered with that momentary something dangerous before returning to their usual placid blue. Be careful with accusations, Mrs. Pierce. They have a way of coming back to haunt people. Veronica stepped back momentarily unsettled by something she couldn't quite name in Kate's demeanor. Is that a threat? Just friendly advice, Kate replied, shouldering her bag. Have a good evening. As Kate walked to her car in the fading light, she noticed she was being followed, not by Veronica or her cronies, but by 2 men in civilian clothes who moved with military precision. She didn't alter her pace or give any indication she'd spotted them, instead taking a slightly longer route to her vehicle that passed by a security camera she knew was monitored by a guard sympathetic to Admiral Thompson. Once in her modest Honda Civic, Kate drove the 15 minutes to her small beachfront cottage on the outskirts of Oceanside. The property wasn't lavish, but its location on a private stretch of beach made it more expensive than an art teacher should have been able to afford. Inside, Kate moved through her evening routine with practiced efficiency, checking the perimeter sensors hidden in her garden, scanning for surveillance devices, and finally securing all doors and windows. Only then did she relax slightly, changing into comfortable clothes and making a simple dinner. At precisely 2100 hours, Kate moved to the back of the house to a bedroom that appeared to be a simple guest room. She pressed her palm against what looked like an ordinary thermostat, activating a hidden scanner. A soft click indicated the security system recognizing her biometrics. A section of the wall slid open, revealing a room that would have shocked anyone who knew Catherine Winslow as the gentle art teacher from Camp Pendleton. The hidden room contained a state-of-the-art communications center, weapons cache, and surveillance system. Multiple monitors displayed camera feeds from strategic locations around her property and key areas of Camp Pendleton. One screen showed real-time satellite imagery that no civilian should have access to. Kate sat at the main console and typed in a complex sequence of commands. A secure communication channel opened and she began her report. Asset Nightingale reporting. Confirmation of FSB operative Volkov on base meeting directly with Colonel Pierce. Pierce requesting access to main communications center. Timeline accelerated. Surveillance photos transmitted via secondary channel. She paused, then added, local asset compromised. Corporal Dixon attacked this morning with Spetsnaz pattern blade. Alive but neutralized as information source. Thompson aware of increased threat level. The response came almost immediately. Confirmation received. Continue monitoring. Extraction protocol may be necessary if cover compromised. Kate frowned. Status of operator ghost. There was a longer pause before the reply appeared. Inbound. ETA 72 hours maximum. Maintain cover until arrival. Kate felt a tightening in her chest at the confirmation. 3 days. After 6 months apart, he would be home in 3 days. If they all survived that long, she closed the secure channel and activated a different system, this one linked to a series of hidden cameras around the base. She focused particularly on Colonel Pierce's office and the Russian contractor's temporary workspace. As she studied the feeds, Kate's mind drifted back to 2003 to the scorching heat of Iraq during Operation Iraqi Freedom. She had been young then, barely 26, officially listed as a war correspondent, but actually gathering intelligence for the CIA's Special Activities Division. The mission had gone catastrophically wrong. Her cover blown, her extraction point compromised, she had found herself being hunted through the streets of Fallujah by insurgents who knew exactly who she was and who she worked for. It was there, cornered in an abandoned building with nothing but a sidearm and 2 remaining bullets, that she had first met the man who would become her husband. Lieutenant James "Ghost" Winslow had appeared like a specter with his SEAL team eliminating her pursuers with terrifying efficiency. He had carried her out through a hail of gunfire, his body shielding hers as they made their escape. "You have terrible luck, ma'am," he had said with a grim smile once they reached safety, blood seeping from a bullet graze on his shoulder that he had ignored completely. "And you have terrible timing," she had replied, attempting to maintain her cover. "I was about to handle the situation." His laugh had been unexpected, a rich sound that seemed out of place in the war-torn landscape. "With 2 bullets and 7 tangos incoming, I'd like to have seen that." Maybe next time, she had promised something unspoken passing between them. There had been a next time 3 months later in Baghdad, and again in Afghanistan in 2005. Their paths had crossed with such frequency that it had become a running joke among their respective teams that Ghost Winslow could find Kate in a sandstorm with his eyes closed. It wasn't until 2008, during a joint CIA SEAL operation in Moscow, tracking Russian arms dealers, that they had finally acknowledged what had been building between them for 5 years. They were married 6 months later, in a small, private ceremony with only their closest colleagues in attendance. For security reasons, their marriage remained classified. To the world, Catherine Winslow was a former journalist who had transitioned to teaching after her experiences in war zones. Lieutenant Commander James Winslow was a decorated SEAL who served his country on classified missions that took him away for months at a time. Only a handful of people knew the truth that they were one of the most effective husband-wife intelligence teams in U.S. history, with a combined confirmed elimination count of hostile operatives that remained redacted even in the highest security briefings. Kate's reminiscence was interrupted by movement on one of her monitors. Colonel Pierce was entering the communications building well after hours, accompanied by 2 of the Russian contractors. She zoomed in on what they were carrying equipment cases that shouldn't have been allowed anywhere near sensitive military communication systems. She quickly documented everything, transmitting the evidence through her secure channel. As she worked, a notification appeared on another screen, Perimeter Alert Northeast Quadrant. Kate immediately switched to the external cameras. 2 figures were approaching her property from the beach side using the natural cover of dunes and seagrass. Their movements were too precise to be casual beachgoers, especially at this hour. Without hesitation, Kate activated a secondary security protocol. Throughout the house, subtle changes occurred. Family photos digitally altered their displays to show different faces. Books on shelves rearranged to titles more appropriate for an art teacher, and the contents of drawers quietly reorganized, hiding anything that might reveal her true identity. She closed the hidden room, which sealed itself without a trace, and moved to the kitchen. By the time the knock came at her door, Kate was in the middle of kneading bread dough flour, dusting her hands and a smudge on her cheek. Kate opened the door to find 2 men in plain clothes, their military bearing impossible to disguise despite their civilian attire. "Ms. Winslow," the taller one asked, flashing a military police badge. "I'm Sergeant Walsh, Base Security. This is Corporal Hernandez. Sorry to disturb you so late, but we need to ask you a few questions." Kate wiped her hands on a kitchen towel, projecting confusion and mild concern. "Of course, come in. Is everything all right?" She led them to her living room, which now displayed the perfect tableau of a single woman's modest life half-finished art projects, books on teaching and art history, and a few framed landscape photographs where military photos had been moments before. "Ma'am, where were you between 500 and 0700 this morning?" Walsh asked without preamble. Kate furrowed her brow. "I was here until about 6. Then I went to collect shells at the beach before heading to the base. I do that most mornings. Is there a problem? And did you encounter anyone during your beach walk?" Kate hesitated, as any innocent person might when trying to recall details. "Well, there were the usual joggers and early surfers. Oh, and I did help an injured Marine. Is this about him? Is he okay?" Walsh and Hernandez exchanged glances. "You administered first aid to Corporal Dixon." "Yes. I found him bleeding behind some rocks. I called for help and did what I could until the ambulance arrived." Kate's concern appeared genuine. "I checked at the medical facility later, and they said he was stable." "Did Corporal Dixon say anything to you about how he was injured?" "Just that he was attacked while jogging. I assumed it was a mugging gone wrong." Kate tilted her head. "Was it something else?" Walsh's expression remained neutral. "We're investigating the incident. Ms. Winslow, how did you know to apply a combat-grade field dressing to a stab wound?" Kate blinked, projecting mild surprise. "I wouldn't call it combat-grade. I've taken several Red Cross courses. As someone who works with children, I believe in being prepared for emergencies." "The medics described your work as professional military standard," Hernandez interjected. "That's flattering, but I simply did what I was trained to do in the courses. Kate smiled modestly. Is there anything else I can help with? The questions continued for another 20 minutes, probing her background, her relationships on base, and her movements over the past week. Kate answered everything with the right balance of cooperation and mild confusion, playing the role of an innocent civilian caught up in events beyond her understanding. Finally, Walsh stood. Thank you for your time, Ms. Winslow. Colonel Pierce may have additional questions for you tomorrow. Colonel Pierce? Kate repeated, letting a touch of apprehension enter her voice. Am I in some kind of trouble? Just routine follow-up, Walsh assured her, though his eyes said otherwise. One last question. Do you live here alone? Kate's expression softened with practiced vulnerability. Yes, just me. My fiancé. He was killed in Afghanistan 5 years ago. I never quite got around to sharing my life with anyone else. The lie was delivered with such perfect emotional nuance that both men's faces showed a flash of sympathy. I'm sorry for your loss, ma'am, Walsh said, his tone genuinely softening. We'll see ourselves out. Once they were gone, Kate maintained her routine for another hour, aware that her house might be under surveillance. She finished baking her bread, ate a small portion with soup, and prepared for bed as any normal person would. Only when she was certain it was safe did she reactivate her hidden security room, sending a brief message. Cover holding. Security questioning escalated. Pierce directing investigation personally. Ghost ETA confirmation requested. The response came back almost immediately. 48 hours. Maintain position. Kate closed her eyes briefly. 48 hours. She could hold her cover that long, but what would happen when James arrived? And more importantly, what was Pierce planning that required compromising the base's communication systems? As she prepared to close the hidden room for the night, a final message appeared. Operation Kandahar files declassified for Ghost Team only. Proceed with extreme caution. Pierce primary suspect in 2012 ambush. Veronica Pierce confirmed former SVR asset. Kate stared at the screen pieces falling into place. Veronica's vendetta against her wasn't just the petty jealousy of a status-conscious officer's wife. It was far more dangerous than that. Veronica Pierce was Russian intelligence, and somehow she knew exactly who Catherine Winslow really was. The next morning, Kate adjusted her routine, arriving at the base an hour earlier than usual. She needed to establish allies and gather more information before Pierce could tighten his net around her. Her first stop was the maintenance facility, where she found Sergeant Major Frank Miller preparing for his morning inspections. Miller looked up as she entered, his weathered face creasing into a warm smile that didn't quite mask the vigilant assessment in his eyes. "Morning, Ms. Winslow," Miller greeted her, his tone casual but his gaze sharp. "Bit early for art class, isn't it?" "Morning, Sergeant Major," Kate replied, handing him a still warm loaf of the bread she had baked the previous night. "Thought you might enjoy this with your coffee." Miller accepted the bread with a knowing look. It was their established signal for needing to talk privately. "Kind of you. Why don't you come in for a cup? Just brewed a fresh pot." Inside his small office, Miller closed the door and activated a small device on his desk that emitted a low hum, blocking any potential listening devices. "You're in trouble, girl," he said without preamble, his jovial demeanor replaced by the sharp intelligence that had kept him alive through decades of service. "Pierce has been asking questions about you all night. Ordered a full background check right down to your kindergarten teacher." Kate nodded. "I know. His wife has been gunning for me for weeks. But this is different. Miller Pierce is working with Russian intelligence." Miller didn't look surprised. "Figured as much when those contractors showed up with gear that doesn't match any legitimate communications equipment I've ever seen. They're installing something in the East Sector Communications Hub today. I need to know what Kate said. Can you get me access? Miller considered this. Janitor called in sick this morning. Very convenient. I could assign you as temporary cleaning staff for community service credit. Kate smiled. Always looking out for me, aren't you? Promised your father I would, Miller said quietly. Kate's smile faltered. You never told me you knew my father. Knew him? Miller's eyes took on a distant look. Thomas Winslow saved my life more than once. Berlin, 1983. Cold War was still freezing everyone's asses off. Your dad and I worked an extraction operation pulling a defector out from under the Stasi's nose. He chuckled at the memory. Thomas was the best intelligence officer I ever met, and the most principled. Miller reached into a drawer and pulled out a faded photograph. It showed a younger Miller standing next to a tall man with Kate's same piercing blue eyes. They were dressed as civilians, but their posture betrayed their military training. He gave me this before his last mission to Moscow. Said if anything happened to him, I should keep an eye on his daughter. Miller handed her the photo. I recognized you the moment you walked onto this base 2 years ago. You have his eyes. Same way of watching everything without seeming to. Kate studied the photograph, her fingers tracing the outline of her father's face. I had no idea you two were so close. Your father didn't advertise his friendships. Too dangerous in our line of work. Miller took back the photo, carefully returning it to the drawer. When Thompson told me why you were really here, I figured Thomas's daughter would need someone watching her back. Kate felt a wave of emotion she rarely allowed herself to experience. Her father had been killed in Moscow in 2009, allegedly by a drunk driver, though she had always suspected Russian intelligence was responsible. Thank you, she said simply. Miller nodded, understanding all she left unsaid. Your husband's coming in, isn't he, the ghost? You know James, too. Know of him. Man's a legend in special operations. One of the few who could match your father for sheer guts. Miller leaned forward. If he's coming back now, things must be worse than I thought. Operation Suri Yaga, Kate said, using the code name for the mission that had gone wrong in Kandahar in 2012. It's all connected. Pierce the Russians, what happened then? Miller's face darkened. That operation cost us 16 good men. If Pierce was the one who sold them out... We need proof, Kate said. Concrete evidence linking Pierce to the Russians both now and in 2012. Miller reached into his desk and pulled out an access badge. Temporary maintenance credential. It'll get you into most areas. For the high-security sections, you'll need to time your entry with the shift change at 1300 hours. Security cameras have a 3-second blind spot during the daily system reset. Kate took the badge, impressed once again by Miller's thoroughness. Any other friendly faces I should know about? Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, from yesterday's meeting. Her husband was one of the SEAL team leaders in Kandahar. Made it out alive, but never walked again. Miller's voice carried old anger. She doesn't know the details, but she's no fan of Pierce. He blocked her husband's full disability benefits on a technicality. Kate nodded, filing away this information. I need to move quickly. Pierce's men are already watching my house. Be careful, Miller warned. These Russians aren't just intelligence. The contractors have the look of Spetsnaz about them. Military intelligence, not just FSB analysts. I've dealt with Spetsnaz before, Kate said, her voice hardening slightly. Miller studied her with newfound respect. I bet you have. He checked his watch. You should go. Take the east corridor to avoid the morning security patrol. Kate stood straightening her simple blouse. Miller, when this is over, I'd like to hear more about my father. The parts that weren't in his official file. The old soldier smiled sadly. It would be my honor. Now go catch yourself a traitor." For the next several hours, Kate moved throughout the base under the guise of her maintenance credentials, carefully mapping the Russians' movements and documenting the equipment they were installing. Using a specialized device disguised as a common multi-tool, she captured frequencies and transmission patterns that confirmed her worst fears. They were creating a shadow communication system that would allow them to intercept all base traffic and potentially insert false commands during critical operations. At 12:45 hours, Kate positioned herself near the East Sector Communications Hub, waiting for the shift change. As Miller had promised, at precisely 1300 hours, the security system reset briefly. She slipped through the door undetected and made her way to the main server room. Inside, she found evidence of the Russians' work, small devices attached to key junction points nearly invisible unless you knew what to look for. Kate quickly photographed everything, then extracted a small flash drive from her pocket and inserted it into one of the terminals. The drive contained a specialized program that would create a ghost copy of all data passing through the compromised systems, routing it to a secure server, where it could be analyzed for evidence against Pierce. As she worked, Kate heard voices approaching. She quickly finished the upload and removed the drive, then positioned herself at a maintenance panel with a legitimate work order Miller had provided. The door opened and Colonel Pierce entered with Mikhail Volkov and another Russian. "Ms. Winslow," Pierce said, surprise quickly turning to suspicion. "What are you doing in a restricted area?" Kate looked up with practiced innocence. "Colonel Pierce, Sergeant Major Miller assigned me to community service after that incident with the paint in the officers' mess. Something about learning the value of maintenance work." She held up the work order. "Just checking this junction box for the reported power fluctuations." Pierce took the work order, examining it closely. "This authorization is for tomorrow." Kate feigned embarrassment. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I must have misread the date. I'll come back tomorrow." "No need," Pierce said, his voice dangerously smooth. "Since you're already here, why don't you finish up now? Under supervision, of course." The way he looked at Volkov made Kate's internal alarms sound. They suspected something. "Of course," she agreed, turning back to the panel. "It won't take long." As she pretended to work, she could feel Pierce's eyes boring into her back. Volkov moved closer, ostensibly to observe, but actually to block her exit path. "You know," Pierce said conversationally, "my wife mentioned you're quite the artist. Former war correspondent turned art teacher. Interesting career change." "War zones change your perspective," Kate replied, keeping her tone light. "I wanted to do something that created beauty, instead of documenting destruction." "Admirable," Pierce nodded. "Though some might say unusual for someone with your background." The emphasis on background confirmed Kate's suspicions. Pierce was fishing, trying to make her reveal something. "My background?" she asked, projecting confusion. "Your father was military, wasn't he?" Pierce pressed. "Army logistics," Kate lied smoothly. "Nothing exciting. He processed equipment requisitions for most of his career." This was the established cover story for her father, whose actual role in the CIA remained classified even years after his death. "Strange," Pierce mused. "I could have sworn I saw his name on a different kind of roster." Kate closed the panel and turned to face him. "All done, sir. The connections seem fine. Must be an issue elsewhere in the system." Pierce didn't move from blocking her path. "You didn't answer my question, Ms. Winslow." "I wasn't aware you'd asked one, Colonel," Kate replied, maintaining her composure. "Was there something specific you wanted to know about my father?" Their standoff was interrupted by the arrival of Rear Admiral Thompson, who entered the room with the authority of his rank fully evident. "Colonel Pierce," Thompson said sharply. Why are civilian contractors in a classified communications hub without proper security clearance? Pierce turned clearly annoyed by the interruption. Admiral Thompson, these men are authorized technical consultants upgrading our systems. Not according to Navcom, they aren't, Thompson countered, holding up a tablet displaying an official notice. All external technical work has been suspended, pending a security review from Pentagon. Pierce's jaw tightened. This is my jurisdiction, Admiral. Base security falls under my command. And base communications fall under mine, Thompson replied evenly. Ms. Winslow, are you finished with the maintenance check? Yes, Admiral, Kate answered. Then you're free to go. I believe you have a class to teach soon. Kate nodded gratefully and slipped past Pierce, feeling his glare following her as she left. Once outside the communications hub, Kate moved quickly to her classroom, aware that the confrontation had only bought her temporary reprieve. Pierce would be coming for her now, and she needed to accelerate her timeline. In her classroom, Kate found the children already waiting, their eager faces lighting up when they saw her. Despite the danger surrounding her, Kate felt a genuine warmth for these kids, many of whom were struggling with the absence of deployed parents. Today we're going to try something different, she announced, pushing aside her worries to focus on them. We're going to create memory boxes for your parents when they return from deployment. As the children worked enthusiastically on their projects, Kate maintained her gentle teacher persona while her mind raced through contingency plans. She needed to get the evidence she'd gathered to a secure location before Pierce could move against her. After class, Kate made her way to the base chapel, one of the few places she knew wouldn't be under surveillance due to privacy regulations. Inside, she found Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez lighting a candle in the small side altar. Ms. Winslow, Rodriguez greeted her with a warm smile. Thank you again for standing your ground at yesterday's meeting. My son has been so much happier since joining your program. I'm glad to hear that, Kate said sincerely. Commander, may I speak with you privately? Rodriguez nodded, leading Kate to a secluded corner of the chapel. What's on your mind? It's about Colonel Pierce, Kate began carefully, and possibly about what happened to your husband in Kandahar. Rodriguez's friendly demeanor instantly hardened. What do you know about that? Not everything, Kate admitted, but enough to believe Pierce may have been involved in compromising that operation. And now he's working with Russian intelligence operatives on this base. Rodriguez stared at her in shock. Those are serious accusations. Do you have proof? I'm gathering it, Kate said, but I need someone I can trust to hold this. She discreetly passed over the flash drive containing the evidence she'd collected. If anything happens to me in the next 48 hours, get this to Admiral Thompson. No one else. Rodriguez accepted the drive, studying Kate with new eyes. You're not just an art teacher, are you? Kate held her gaze steadily. Let's just say I understand what your husband went through better than most would expect. A look of realization crossed Rodriguez's face. CIA. Kate neither confirmed nor denied it. What matters now is stopping Pierce before he can do more damage. Will you help me? Rodriguez slipped the drive into her pocket. For what they did to Michael and his team, absolutely. Their conversation was interrupted by Kate's phone vibrating with an alert. She checked it to find a message from the base community center. The anniversary celebration planning committee had called an emergency meeting. I have to go, Kate said. Remember 48 hours. If you don't hear from me by then, get that drive to Thompson. Rodriguez nodded grimly. Be careful, Winslow. Whatever game you're playing, Pierce is playing for keeps. So am I, Kate replied softly. So am I. The base was buzzing with preparations for the 75th anniversary celebration of Camp Pendleton's founding. Banners hung from buildings, Stages were being erected on the parade grounds, and security checkpoints were being established for the high-ranking officials expected to attend. Kate arrived at the community center to find Veronica Pierce presiding over a chaotic planning meeting, issuing orders like a field commander. "The Secretary of Defense has confirmed his attendance," Veronica announced to the committee, "as has the Commandant of the Marine Corps and representatives from allied nations. This celebration must be flawless." Her eyes landed on Kate as she entered. "Ah, Miss Winslow, so glad you could join us. We were just discussing your contribution." Kate took her seat, noting the unusual number of security personnel positioned around the room. "I understood my art students would be creating displays representing the base's history." "Change of plans," Veronica said with a tight smile. "We've decided that children's artwork doesn't quite meet the standard for such a prestigious event. Instead, you'll be assisting with general setup and serving duties." It was a deliberate demotion designed to humiliate her in front of the committee. Kate recognized it for what it was, an attempt to provoke a reaction that would justify further scrutiny. "Whatever serves the event best," Kate replied diplomatically. "Although the children will be disappointed. Many have parents who won't be home for the holidays, and this was their chance to feel included in something important." Several committee members shifted uncomfortably at this, and Kate saw Rodriguez give her a subtle nod of approval for the tactical response. Veronica's smile turned brittle. "How touching. But this isn't about children's feelings. It's about presenting our base in the best possible light." The meeting continued with Veronica outlining security protocols that seemed excessive even for an event with high-ranking officials. Kate noted that Colonel Pierce's security team would have unprecedented access to all areas, including communications and restricted zones. As diagrams of the event layout were distributed, Kate immediately identified multiple security vulnerabilities. The stage where officials would be seated was positioned with limited evacuation routes, and the communications center for the event was isolated from the main security perimeter. When Kate raised these concerns, Veronica dismissed them immediately. "Security arrangements have been approved by Colonel Pierce personally," she said coldly. "Unless you have military security expertise you've been hiding along with your other talents, I suggest you stick to your assigned duties." The meeting adjourned with Kate assigned to help prepare the reception area, conveniently located far from the main stage and command center. As the committee members dispersed, Veronica held Kate back. "A word, Ms. Winslow." When they were alone, Veronica's artificial smile vanished. "I know exactly what you're doing." "Helping with the celebration?" Kate asked innocently. "Don't play games with me," Veronica hissed. "My husband told me about your little maintenance act this morning. Quite the coincidence, you being in exactly the wrong place at exactly the wrong time." Kate maintained her calm facade. "I was following orders from Sergeant Major Miller. If there was a scheduling error, that's hardly my fault." "There are no coincidences with people like you," Veronica pressed, stepping closer. "You think I don't recognize the signs? The way you move, the way you observe everything, the way you never quite fit in despite trying so hard to appear normal." "Mrs. Pierce, I'm not sure what you're implying, but I'm just an art teacher trying to do my job." Veronica laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "An art teacher who knows how to field-dress combat wounds. An art teacher who speaks 6 languages but pretends to struggle with basic Spanish when the Mexican gardener talks to her. An art teacher who maintains perfect situational awareness even when pretending to be focused on finger paints." Kate felt a chill. Veronica had been watching her far more closely than she'd realized. "You've been misinformed," Kate said carefully. "No, I haven't," Veronica replied, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Katerina Ryanova." Kate's blood froze. Katerina Ryanova was the cover identity she had used during an operation in Moscow in 2008, the operation where she had met James for the third time. It was a name that should have been buried in the deepest classified files known only to a handful of people. "I don't know who that is," Kate managed to say, but the momentary flash of shock in her eyes had already betrayed her. Veronica smiled triumphantly. "Of course you don't. Just as I'm sure you don't know a certain ghost who left quite an impression in Kandahar." The mention of James's operative name in connection with Kandahar confirmed Kate's worst fears. Veronica knew everything, which meant Pierce knew everything. "My husband has been waiting a very long time to meet the famous Mrs. Winslow," Veronica continued. "Or should I say Agent Winslow? He has so many questions about what happened in 2012. "I think you've confused me with someone else," Kate insisted, mind racing to formulate an exit strategy. "We'll see," Veronica said sweetly as the door opened and Colonel Pierce entered with 2 security officers. "My husband has excellent memory for faces." Pierce approached slowly, studying Kate with the focused intensity of a predator. "Ms. Winslow, or should I use your CIA designation, Nightingale, I believe they call you." Kate shifted subtly into a more defensible stance, cataloging possible weapons in the room and calculating odds against 3 opponents. "Colonel Pierce, I have no idea what you're talking about," she said, injecting a note of fear into her voice. "This is crazy. I'm just an art teacher." Pierce circled her slowly. "An art teacher who graduated top of her class at the farm. An art teacher whose husband led the SEAL team that nearly caught me in Kandahar." "I'm not married," Kate protested. "My fiancé died in Afghanistan years ago." "Lieutenant Commander James Winslow is very much alive," Pierce countered. "And according to our intelligence, he's on his way here right now. Isn't that interesting timing?" Kate realized her cover was completely blown. She needed to stall until she could find an opportunity to escape or signal for help. "Colonel, your wife clearly has some issues with me, but this has gone too far. I'd like to speak with Admiral Thompson." "Thompson can't help you," Pierce said dismissively. "In fact, he'll soon be facing his own problems. Security breaches are serious matters, and evidence suggests he's been compromised by foreign intelligence." Kate understood the implication. Pierce was planning to frame Thompson as the traitor to cover his own activities. "Now," Pierce continued, "we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Tell us exactly what you know about Operation Suri Yaga and what evidence you've gathered against me, and perhaps we can reach an arrangement." "I don't know anything about any operation," Kate insisted. "This is insane. I want a lawyer." Pierce sighed theatrically. "Hard way it is." He nodded to the security officers. "Take her to the special interrogation room. No records, no witnesses." As the officers moved toward her, Kate knew she had seconds to act. She had hoped to maintain her cover until James arrived, but that was no longer an option. She feigned a moment of panic, stumbling backward as if overwhelmed by fear. As one officer reached for her arm, she struck with practiced precision, using his momentum against him to send him crashing into his partner. In the same fluid motion, she grabbed a heavy crystal award from a nearby shelf and hurled it at the room's overhead light, plunging them into partial darkness, broken only by the sunlight from the windows. "Stop her!" Pierce shouted as Kate vaulted over a table and headed for the door. Veronica moved to block her path, but years of CIA combat training had prepared Kate for exactly this scenario. She sidestepped Veronica's attempt to grab her, using the woman's momentum to send her sprawling into Pierce. Kate burst through the door and sprinted down the hallway, her mind calculating the fastest route to safety. She needed to reach Admiral Thompson or Miller, someone who could help secure the evidence against Pierce before he could destroy it all. Behind her, Alarms began to sound as Pierce mobilized security forces against her. Kate ducked into a maintenance corridor, using her knowledge of the base's layout to evade her pursuers. She extracted her phone and sent an emergency signal through her secure channel. Cover blown. Pierce confirmed hostile. Anniversary celebration is target. Ghost ETA. The response came immediately. 24 hours. Maintain evasion protocols. Extraction team inbound. 24 hours. She needed to stay alive and free until then, while gathering enough evidence to stop whatever Pierce had planned for the celebration. Kate moved through the base using service tunnels and maintenance shafts, avoiding the security teams now actively hunting her. She made her way to the chaplain's office, where she had hidden an emergency kit weeks earlier as a precaution. The chapel was empty when she arrived, allowing her to retrieve the hidden package from behind a loose wall panel in the confessional. Inside was a satellite phone, a loaded Glock 19 false identification, and $5,000 in cash. Standard CIA emergency provisions. As she prepared to leave the chapel, door opened. Kate raised her weapon, then quickly lowered it when she saw it was Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez. "They're saying you attacked Colonel Pierce and his security team," Rodriguez said, closing the door behind her. "The whole base is looking for you." "Pierce is a Russian asset," Kate said bluntly, abandoning any pretense. "He's planning something at the celebration tomorrow. An assassination, or worse." Rodriguez didn't seem surprised by the revelation of Kate's true nature. "I figured you were intelligence when you gave me that drive. My husband said the ambush in Kandahar was an inside job. He always suspected Pierce." "It was," Kate confirmed. "Pierce sold out 16 special operators to the Taliban for Russian money. My husband's team was sent to extract them, but they were too late for most." "And now he's doing it again," Rodriguez said grimly, "using the celebration as cover." Kate nodded. "I need to get word to Admiral Thompson. Pierce is planning to frame him as the traitor. Thompson's been confined to quarters pending an investigation," Rodriguez reported. "Pierce is claiming he found evidence Thompson was passing information to foreign agents." "Perfect timing," Kate said bitterly. "With Thompson out of the way, Pierce has complete control of the base for the celebration." Rodriguez checked her watch. The Russian contractors just completed installing something in the main communications array. Whatever they're planning, it's happening soon. Kate made a decision. "I need your help. Can you get a message to FBI Special Agent Laura Chen? She's stationed in the San Diego Field Office Counterintelligence Division." "I can try," Rodriguez offered. "What's the message?" "Tell her Nightingale confirms Crimson Protocol active at Pendleton celebration. Ghost inbound 24 hours. Request immediate support." Kate handed Rodriguez a secure communication device. "Use this. It can't be tracked or intercepted." Rodriguez took the device, studying Kate with newfound respect. "You're really her, aren't you? The woman they call the Ghost's shadow. My husband said there was a female CIA operative who worked with the Ghost's SEAL team. Said she was deadlier than most of the SEALs." Kate didn't confirm or deny it. What matters now is stopping Pierce. The Secretary of Defense and dozens of high-ranking officials will be at that celebration. If Pierce is working for the Russians, this could be catastrophic. "What's your plan?" "I need to stay hidden until James arrives with his team," Kate explained. "Meanwhile, I'll try to gather more concrete evidence of what Pierce is planning." "I can help with that," Rodriguez offered. "As logistics officer, I have access to all supply requisitions. Pierce has ordered some unusual equipment in the past week. Send me the details through this." Kate handed her a secure flash drive. "Any unusual patterns could help us figure out their plan." Rodriguez nodded, then hesitated. "There's something else you should know. Pierce has taken a special interest in the flagpole at the center of the parade ground. Had it reinforced and modified yesterday. Said it was for a special tribute during the ceremony. Kate frowned. What kind of modification? Added a pulley system at the top separate from the normal flag mechanisms, strong enough to lift a considerable weight. A chill ran down Kate's spine as she realized what Pierce might be planning. A public execution, or a demonstration of power. You think he'd go that far on a U.S. military base? If he's working for Russian military intelligence, yes, Kate said grimly. It would be a devastating symbolic victory to execute an American operative on American soil in front of military and government leadership. Rodriguez looked horrified. We have to stop this. We will, Kate assured her. But first, I need to find a secure location to coordinate with James's team. Once they arrive, we can move against Pierce directly. There's an old bunker from the 1950s beneath the Eastern Training Grounds, Rodriguez suggested. It's not on any current maps, but my husband showed it to me years ago. Could be a good place to lay low. Kate nodded gratefully. Perfect. Now go before someone notices you're missing. And Rodriguez, be careful. Pierce won't hesitate to eliminate anyone he suspects is helping me. After Rodriguez left, Kate changed into the civilian clothes from her emergency kit and used the service exit from the chapel, moving across the base using every shadow and blind spot in the security system. She made her way toward the Eastern Training Grounds. As dusk fell over Camp Pendleton, Kate found the hidden entrance to the old bunker disguised as a drainage culvert beneath an embankment. Inside, she established a secure communications post and began analyzing all the information she had gathered. On a small tactical computer, she mapped the celebration layout, identifying all security positions and potential vulnerabilities. The modified flagpole at the center of the parade ground remained the most troubling element. Whatever Pierce was planning, that flagpole would play a central role. Kate sent an encrypted update to James's team with all her findings, adding her suspicion about the flagpole. His response was immediate and grim. Trap confirmed. Accelerating timeline. Ghost Team ETA 0400 hours. Dawn was still hours away as Kate prepared for what would likely be the most dangerous operation of her career. Not just her life was at stake, but potentially those of dozens of military and government leaders and the security of the nation itself. She checked her weapon one final time and reviewed the base schematics, committing every detail to memory. Whatever Pierce had planned for the celebration, Kate was determined to ensure it would be his last operation as a Russian asset. As she settled in to wait for James's arrival, Kate found herself thinking of her father. Thomas Winslow had died trying to expose a Russian mole in U.S. intelligence. Now, years later, she was facing a similar enemy. The symmetry wasn't lost on her. "I'll finish what you started, Dad," she whispered into the darkness of the bunker. "I promise." The morning of Camp Pendleton's 75th anniversary celebration dawned clear and bright, the California sun casting long shadows across the base as final preparations were underway. By 0700 hours, the parade grounds had been transformed into an elaborate venue worthy of the high-profile guests expected to attend. Catherine Winslow observed from her hidden position near the eastern perimeter, using high-powered binoculars to survey the scene. She had abandoned all pretense of being the gentle art teacher now dressed in tactical black, her hair tightly secured and her movements precise and economical. The transformation was so complete that even those who thought they knew her would have paused in recognition. The crowd began to gather by 800 hours. Military personnel in crisp dress uniforms, civilian contractors, and families of officers stationed at the base. Security checkpoints funneled attendees through metal detectors and bag searches, though Kate noted that several of Pierce's men were waving through the Russian contractors without inspection. "Perimeter teams in position," Kate murmured into her secure comm unit. "Confirm status." "Echo team in position," came the reply from Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, who had volunteered to coordinate with the small network of allies Kate had assembled overnight. "FBI Agent Chen has a tactical team standing by 5 miles out, awaiting your signal." Kate acknowledged this with a brief click of her transmitter. She watched as Colonel Pierce strode across the parade grounds, barking orders at his security team. Beside him, Veronica Pierce moved with cold elegance, supervising the final arrangements for the VIP seating area directly in front of the central flagpole. The flagpole itself had been decorated with patriotic bunting, effectively concealing the modifications Rodriguez had reported. Kate zoomed in with her binoculars, noting the barely visible pulley system that had been installed near the top, strong enough to lift a significant weight. "Target Alpha moving to command post," Kate reported, as Pierce entered the temporary command center set up at the edge of the parade grounds. At 0900 hours, the first VIPs began to arrive. Generals, admirals, and senior Pentagon officials. Each was escorted by Pierce's security team to the reserved seating area. Kate watched as the Secretary of Defense's motorcade pulled through the main gate at 0915, accompanied by an impressive security detail that was quickly separated from their principal by Pierce's men. "They're isolating the Secretary's protective detail," Kate observed. "Standard tactic before an operation." Kate shifted her focus to the Russian contractors who had taken positions around the communications array. One was speaking into a concealed transmitter, his lips barely moving. "Sir, do we have confirmation on Ghost Team's ETA?" Rodriguez asked through the comm. "Negative," Kate replied, tension evident in her voice. "James and his SEAL team should have made contact by now." The silence was concerning. At 0945, a military band began playing as the ceremony officially commenced. Rear Admiral Thompson was conspicuously absent, still confined to quarters under Pierce's orders. The base commander who took the podium instead was a recent transfer who owed his promotion to Pierce's recommendation. As the speeches began, Kate detected movement at the perimeter of the base. Scanning with her binoculars, she spotted several unmarked vans arriving through a service entrance, bypassing the main security checkpoints. Men in what appeared to be catering uniforms emerged, but their movements betrayed military training. "We have additional hostiles entering through the South Service Gate," Kate reported. "At least 12, possibly more." "Confirmed," Rodriguez replied. "They're carrying equipment cases, not food service." Kate's instincts screamed danger. Whatever Pierce had planned was beginning to unfold, and James was still nowhere in sight. She needed to act now, before the situation deteriorated further. "I'm moving to intercept," she decided, slipping from her observation post and making her way toward the service entrance using the cover of maintenance buildings and equipment. As she approached, Kate observed the new arrivals distributing what appeared to be standard security earpieces, but were likely secure communications devices for coordinating the operation. One man opened a case containing what Kate immediately recognized as Russian SVD Dragunov sniper rifles, military-grade hardware that had no place on an American base. Kate captured images using a specialized camera designed to transmit automatically through encrypted channels. Evidence was still crucial even as the threat escalated. She was about to move closer when her tactical radio crackled with Rodriguez's urgent voice. "Nightingale, they're sweeping the east sector. Fall back immediately." Too late. A security team rounded the corner led by one of Pierce's men. "There, it's Winslow." Kate didn't hesitate. She burst from cover, closing the distance to the nearest guard before he could raise his weapon. A precise strike to his throat silenced any alarm he might have raised, while a follow-up sweep took his legs from under him. As he fell, Kate relieved him of his sidearm and radio. The second guard managed to fire a single shot that grazed Kate's shoulder before she neutralized him with two rapid strikes to the solar plexus and temple. The third reached for his radio, but Kate's thrown combat knife pinned his hand to the wooden utility pole behind him. His scream was cut short by Kate's fist, connecting with his jaw. Blood trickled down Kate's arm from the bullet graze, but she ignored it quickly, binding the wound with a field dressing from her tactical vest. The entire encounter had taken less than 15 seconds, but the gunshot would have been heard. "Cover blown," she reported tersely, moving to secondary position. Kate retrieved her knife and headed toward the main ceremony area. She needed to warn someone about the imminent threat, but with Pierce's people controlling all official security, her options were limited. The base commander was concluding his welcome speech as Kate circled behind the VIP seating area. The Secretary of Defense was scheduled to speak next, making him the most likely target if this was an assassination plot. Kate spotted a familiar face in the crowd, Sergeant Major Miller, positioned near the right side of the stage. She needed to reach him without being detected by Pierce's security team, who were now actively searching for her. As the applause for the base commander's speech died down, the PA system suddenly emitted a piercing feedback screech. The crowd winced collectively, and in that moment of distraction, several things happened simultaneously. First, all radio communications on standard military frequencies went dead, replaced by static. Second, the large screens set up around the venue that had been showing the American flag flickered and displayed what appeared to be classified Pentagon documents. And third, Colonel Pierce took the stage instead of the Secretary of Defense. "Ladies and gentlemen," Pierce announced, his voice carrying an authority that silenced the confused murmurs, "I apologize for the technical difficulties. However, I must interrupt our planned program to address a serious security breach." Kate froze instantly, understanding what was happening. This wasn't just an assassination. It was a public spectacle designed to humiliate American military leadership. "As head of base security," Pierce continued, "it is my solemn duty to inform you that we have uncovered a traitor in our midst. Someone who has been passing classified information to foreign powers, endangering our personnel and our nation's security." The crowd gasped as the screens displayed what appeared to be surveillance photos of Kate meeting with various military personnel, doctored to look clandestine and suspicious. "Catherine Winslow," Pierce announced dramatically, "has been identified as a deep-cover Russian intelligence operative who infiltrated our base under the guise of an art teacher." The irony of Pierce, the actual Russian asset, accusing her of being one, would have been amusing under different circumstances. Kate realized this was the perfect cover. By exposing her real identity as CIA, but falsely labeling her a Russian agent, Pierce was setting her up to take the fall for his own treason. "Security teams are currently apprehending this dangerous individual," Pierce continued. "Rest assured, she will face justice for her crimes against our nation." As if on cue, the base alarm system activated, and Pierce's security teams began moving through the crowd with photos of Kate. The civilians looked frightened while the military personnel appeared grimly determined to catch the traitor in their midst. Kate needed to reach Miller or Rodriguez, but movement would expose her position. Before she could decide on her next move, a hand gripped her arm from behind. "Don't make a sound," whispered Veronica Pierce, pressing a pistol into Kate's ribs. "My husband wants to speak with you before your public confession." Kate considered her options. She could easily disarm Veronica despite the gun, but doing so would create a scene that would bring Pierce's entire security force down on her. Better to play along and look for an opportunity closer to Pierce himself. "How long have you been working for them?" Kate asked quietly, as Veronica marched her through a service corridor behind the stage. Veronica's laugh was cold. Longer than you've been playing house with your seal. Moscow's finest recruited me at West Point, before they expelled me for that manufactured cheating scandal. The perfect cover for activating me as a sleeper. And Pierce, a practical man, Veronica said with a smile. Show him enough money and power and patriotism becomes very flexible. The Russians offered both. They reached a temporary security office set up in a building adjacent to the parade grounds. Inside, Colonel Pierce was monitoring the ceremony via video feeds while coordinating his teams through a secure radio channel. "Ah, the famous Nightingale," Pierce said without turning around. "Caught at last. Your reputation in Moscow is quite impressive. 15 confirmed eliminations of Russian operatives across 3 continents. They've had a bounty on you for years." "And now you'll collect it," Kate said, assessing the room for weapons exits and potential advantages. "Indeed," Pierce finally faced her. "But first, you'll help us send a message to your arrogant CIA handlers and your husband's SEAL team." By falsely confessing to being a Russian spy, Kate kept her tone conversational, buying time. "Precisely. A public confession followed by an unfortunate suicide when you couldn't live with your betrayal being exposed." Pierce checked his watch. "The Secretary of Defense will be quite shocked when his trusted aide reveals your confession, right before the aide takes him hostage on live television." The full scope of the plan became clear to Kate. This wasn't just about eliminating her or even assassinating officials. It was about creating a spectacle of American military vulnerability that would undermine global confidence in U.S. security. "Why the flagpole modifications?" Kate asked, noting Veronica's subtle shift at the question. Pierce smiled coldly. The American flag lowered, the traitor raised in its place. "Symbolic. Don't you think you'll hang there as an example while we complete the main operation? Which is the complete compromise of the Pentagon's secure communications network," Pierce revealed with evident pride. "The equipment my Russian friends installed isn't just intercepting local communications, it's creating a backdoor into SIPRNet. By this evening, Russian intelligence will have access to every classified communication in the U.S. military system." Kate kept her expression neutral, despite the gravity of this revelation. Pierce was describing potentially the most devastating intelligence breach in American history. "Ambitious," she commented. "But you're forgetting something important." "Oh," Pierce raised an eyebrow. "And what might that be?" "My husband is coming," Kate said simply, "and he doesn't like it when people threaten me." Pierce laughed dismissively. "Your husband and his team were intercepted hours ago. That's why they never made contact. By now, they are either dead or captured." For the first time, Kate felt a flicker of genuine concern. If James had been compromised... "Now," Pierce continued, "we have a ceremony to continue. Veronica, prepare her for transport to the main venue." As Veronica moved behind her with restraints, Kate knew her window for action was closing. She had to move now, even at the risk of taking on both Pierces alone. Kate's training had prepared her for precisely this kind of situation. As Veronica reached for her wrists, Kate dropped her center of gravity and spun, using her shoulder to knock the gun aside while simultaneously sweeping Veronica's legs. The woman fell hard, her pistol clattering across the floor. Pierce reacted immediately, drawing his sidearm, but Kate was already in motion. She flipped the heavy wooden table between them, forcing Pierce to dodge as it crashed toward him. In the same fluid movement, she grabbed a metal paperweight from the desk and hurled it at the overhead light, plunging the room into shadows broken only by the glow of the computer monitors. Pierce fired twice, the bullets splintering the wood where Kate had been a split second earlier. She moved like a shadow through the darkened room, closing distance before Pierce could adjust his aim. Her first strike knocked the gun from his hand. Her second sent him staggering backward into the wall. But Pierce was no ordinary officer. His counterattack came fast and skilled, a series of precise strikes that revealed specialized combat training. Kate blocked a potentially devastating blow to her throat, absorbing a painful hit to her wounded shoulder in exchange. As they grappled, Veronica recovered her weapon and aimed it at Kate's back. "Stop, or I'll shoot." Kate knew she couldn't face both of them in these close quarters. She needed to escape and warn the authorities about the Siparnet breach, which was far more significant than her personal vindication. Using Pierce as a shield, Kate backed toward the door. "Your plan won't work. Even if you kill me, there are others who know what you're doing." "No one who can stop it in time," Pierce snarled, blood trickling from his split lip. "The operation is already underway." Kate felt the door handle behind her. In one explosive movement, she shoved Pierce into Veronica, sending both of them sprawling, and bolted through the door. Outside, chaos had erupted across the parade grounds. The screens were displaying what appeared to be classified operation details, creating confusion and alarm among the military leadership present. Security teams were moving the Secretary of Defense and other VIPs to secure locations directly into the hands of Pierce's Russian operatives. Kate sprinted toward the communications center where the Siparnet breach would be centered. She had to destroy the Russian equipment before the back door was fully established. She was halfway there when a security team spotted her. "There she is, the Russian spy." Gunfire erupted around her as Kate dove behind a concrete barrier. She was outgunned and surrounded with the entire base now hunting for her based on Pierce's accusations. As security closed in from all sides, Kate knew she had run out of options. She could fight, might even take down several of them, but ultimately she would be captured or killed before she could stop Pierce's operation. Just as she prepared to make a final stand, all hell broke loose at the perimeter of the base. The explosion at the East Gate rocked the entire ceremony venue. Black smoke billowed into the clear blue sky as flames engulfed the security checkpoint. In the ensuing confusion, Kate seized her opportunity, slipping past the distracted security teams and making her way toward the center of the parade grounds. Through her tactical earpiece, she heard Rodriguez's voice. "Nightingale, multiple breaches reported at all access points. Unknown forces entering the base." "Is it Ghost Team?" Kate asked, hope rising in her chest. "Negative. These are Pierce's reinforcements. Russian Spetsnaz by their movements." Kate's heart sank. Pierce had called in his real muscle, likely planning to eliminate all witnesses once the operation was complete. With Spetsnaz operators on base, the danger had increased exponentially. She reached the edge of the crowd gathering at the central flagpole where Colonel Pierce had retaken the stage. His uniform was straightened, showing no evidence of their recent struggle. "Due to the security breach, we are implementing emergency protocols," Pierce announced. "All civilians will be escorted to secure shelters. Military personnel will report to their designated response positions." It was a clever move. By separating the civilians from military personnel, Pierce could more easily control both groups and eliminate any resistance. "We have apprehended the primary suspect in this treasonous activity," Pierce continued as Veronica appeared beside him, dragging a woman in handcuffs. Kate stared in shock. The woman wasn't her. It was Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, beaten and bloodied, but still defiant. "This officer was caught transmitting classified information to known foreign agents," Pierce declared. "She will be dealt with according to military justice." Kate understood immediately. Having failed to capture her, Pierce had substituted Rodriguez as the scapegoat. It was a desperation move that told Kate he was accelerating his timeline. As if confirming her assessment, Pierce gave a signal, and his security team began to attach cables to Rodriguez's restraints. As an example to all who would betray their country, Pierce announced, "The traitor will be displayed where all can see the price of treason." With mechanical precision, the pulley system on the flagpole activated. The American flag was lowered, and Rodriguez was hoisted into the air, her feet leaving the ground as she was suspended from the pole like a macabre trophy. The crowd's reaction was immediate and visceral. Gasps of shock rippled through the gathered military personnel and civilians. Several officers stepped forward in protest, only to be blocked by Pierce's security forces. Families with children turned away, mothers shielding young eyes from the disturbing spectacle. "This is barbaric," shouted a Navy captain from the front row, his face flushed with anger. "We don't treat our own like this, even if the accusations were true." "Stand down, Captain," one of Pierce's men ordered, hand moving to his weapon. The assembled high-ranking officials whispered urgently among themselves, clearly disturbed by this unprecedented display. Kate could see the Secretary of Defense engaged in heated conversation with his aides, his face a mask of controlled outrage. Among the regular enlisted personnel, confusion reigned. Many had known and respected Rodriguez for years. Their expressions registered disbelief, uncertainty, and growing suspicion about Pierce's actions. These weren't mindless followers. They were trained American soldiers, witnessing something that violated every principle of military justice they'd been taught to uphold. Even among Pierce's security forces, several looked uncomfortable with this extreme display. One young MP turned away, unable to watch, while another whispered to his colleague, "This isn't right, man. This isn't what we do." Rodriguez didn't scream or beg. Instead, she looked directly at Pierce and spoke loudly enough for those nearby to hear, "The real traitor is giving this order." Pierce's face darkened with rage. "Gag her!" Before his men could comply, Rodriguez continued, "Colonel Pierce works for Russian intelligence. This is a coup." Her words, spoken clearly and without fear, sent another wave of murmurs through the crowd. The seeds of doubt were being planted. Pierce drew his sidearm, aiming it at Rodriguez. "One more word, and I'll execute you for treason right now." This escalation shocked even his supporters. A collective intake of breath swept through the crowd. Even hardened combat veterans looked appalled at the public threat of summary execution. Kate knew she had seconds to act before Pierce silenced Rodriguez permanently. But moving now would expose her with no clear advantage. The decision was made for her when Veronica spotted her in the crowd. "There, it's Winslow." Kate didn't wait for Pierce's security to react. She burst forward, using the shocked civilians as cover, while she closed the distance to the stage. Pierce turned, firing twice in her direction, forcing people to dive for cover, as panic erupted. The crowd scattered in all directions, screaming and shouting. Military personnel tried to maintain order, many of them torn between following Pierce's orders and the growing suspicion that something was terribly wrong. Some civilians fled toward the exits, while others huddled behind whatever cover they could find. A few braver souls helped the elderly and children to safety. "Everyone stay calm," shouted a Marine sergeant, trying to control the situation. "Get to the designated evacuation points." In the chaos, Kate reached the flagpole controls. With a swift motion, she reversed the pulley system, lowering Rodriguez back to the ground. As Pierce's security converged on her position, Kate stood her ground, prepared to make her last stand, protecting Rodriguez. "Stop right there, Winslow," Pierce shouted, his gun trained on her. "It's over." "Is it?" Kate replied calmly, making no move toward her own weapon. "You might want to look up, Colonel." Pierce's eyes flicked skyward, involuntarily, and in that moment of distraction, the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors cut through the chaos. Not one helicopter, but 3 Blackhawks appeared over the tree line, moving in fast and low. "Impossible," Pierce whispered, his face draining of color. They were intercepted. Kate smiled for the first time that day. "You should know by now. You can't intercept a ghost." The lead Blackhawk hovered directly over the parade ground, and fast ropes deployed from its open doors. Down these ropes slid 6 figures in full tactical gear, their movements synchronized with practiced precision. They hit the ground in perfect formation, weapons up and scanning for threats. The crowd fell silent as the SEAL team secured a perimeter around the flagpole. Their leader stepped forward, removing his tactical helmet to reveal a face weathered by years of combat, distinguished by a long scar from temple to chin. "Colonel Pierce," Commander James "Ghost" Winslow said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the now silent parade ground. "By order of the Secretary of Defense, you are relieved of command, effective immediately." The atmosphere shifted palpably. The arrival of the SEAL team, clearly American forces, not Pierce's Russian reinforcements, created a sense of relief and renewed confidence among the military personnel present. Several senior officers moved immediately to James's side, signaling their support. Enlisted men and women straightened, looking to the newcomers with expressions of hope and respect. A Marine Master Sergeant near the front muttered loud enough for those around him to hear, "That's the Ghost. If he's here, we're going to be all right." "I trained with his team once," another soldier whispered. "The stories are all true." Pierce's security team hesitated, caught between loyalty to their commanding officer and the unmistakable authority of the legendary SEAL commander standing before them. Several lowered their weapons, slightly uncertainty clear in their posture. Pierce recovered quickly, his training reasserting itself. "Commander Winslow, this woman is a confirmed Russian operative. She has compromised base security and endangered classified operations." James's expression remained impassive as he looked from Pierce to Kate. "Are you referring to my wife, Colonel—" A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, followed by an eruption of whispers. Officers who had earlier dismissed Kate as merely a civilian art teacher now stared in shock, reassessing every interaction they'd ever had with her. Some looked embarrassed, remembering dismissive comments they'd made within her hearing. His wife, an operative. All this time, the murmurs spread like wildfire. One captain who had often brought his daughter to Kate's art class looked particularly stunned. "She taught my Kelly how to paint," he said to his colleague, shaking his head in disbelief. Veronica Pierce's face contorted with fury as she realized their carefully constructed narrative was collapsing. Her perfectly maintained composure cracked, revealing the desperation beneath. "Your wife," Pierce repeated, feigning confusion. "Commander, I believe you've been misled. This woman is Senior Intelligence Officer Catherine Winslow, CIA Special Activities Division," James interrupted. "Currently on assignment investigating Russian penetration of U.S. military installations. An assignment authorized by the Director of National Intelligence himself." The revelation landed like a thunderbolt. Those who had been ready to believe Pierce's accusations now looked at Kate with newfound respect, and in many cases, embarrassment. Several of Veronica's committee members, who had treated Kate with condescension, appeared mortified suddenly, understanding the significance of the woman they had tried to bully. Kate moved to Rodriguez, quickly freeing her from the restraints. "Are you all right?" Rodriguez nodded grimly, wiping blood from her face. "I'll live. But Pierce has the Secretary of Defense isolated in the command center with his Russian operators." James overheard this exchange. Alpha Team, secure the command center. Bravo, locate and protect the secretary. 4 SEALs immediately moved out, executing his orders with machine-like efficiency. Pierce recognized his plan unraveling. With a desperate lunge, he grabbed Veronica and held his pistol to her head. "Nobody move! I'll kill her!" The remaining SEALs trained their weapons on Pierce, but James held up his hand, signaling them to hold fire. "Using your own wife as a shield, Pierce," James asked, his voice heavy with disgust. "That's low even for a traitor." Veronica's eyes widened in shock as she felt the cold barrel of her husband's gun pressed against her temple. The realization that he would sacrifice her without hesitation was evident in her expression, a mixture of fear, betrayal, and dawning understanding that she had allied herself with a man who valued only his own survival. "I'm no traitor," Pierce shouted, his composure cracking. "I'm a patriot who understands the future. America is weak, corrupted from within. Russia offers strength, purpose." "Russia offers money," Kate countered, stepping forward despite James's warning glance. "That's all this has ever been about for you. How much did they pay you to betray those 16 men in Kandahar?" Pierce's eyes widened at the direct accusation. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about," Kate continued. "We have the transfer records, the communications, everything. Your Russian handlers weren't as careful as they should have been." This was a calculated bluff, but Kate could see from Pierce's expression that it had hit home. He believed they had concrete evidence of his treason. "It doesn't matter," Pierce snarled. "The operation is already complete. The back door into Cypernet is established. By now, Russian intelligence has access to everything." James smiled coldly. "Is that what they told you? That equipment your Russian friends installed, it's been transmitting to NSA servers for the past 6 hours. Every communication, every contact, every Russian intelligence officer involved, all of it documented and traced back to Moscow." Pierce's face drained of color as he realized the truth. "You're lying." "We've known about you for months, Pierce," James continued. "Kate was sent here specifically to confirm your role and identify your network. You've been under surveillance from the beginning." This wasn't entirely true. They had suspected Pierce, but lacked concrete proof until recently. But the psychological impact on Pierce was immediate and devastating. The moment your Russian friends accessed what they thought was Cypernet, they actually triggered a massive counterintelligence operation, James explained. "Right now, Russian intelligence networks around the world are being rolled up based on the data they unwittingly provided while thinking they were breaching our systems." Veronica, still held at gunpoint by her husband, began to laugh, a cold, bitter sound. "You fool," she said to Pierce. "You arrogant, stupid fool. You thought you were so clever, but they were using you just like they used me." "Shut up!" Pierce pressed the gun harder against her temple. "Moscow never believed in you." Veronica continued, her voice dripping with contempt. "You were always expendable. A diversion while the real operation proceeded elsewhere." The crowd watched in tense silence as the drama unfolded. No one moved, afraid to trigger Pierce into violence. His face contorted with a mixture of rage, fear, and dawning realization that he had been manipulated by the very people he thought he was serving. Pierce's control was visibly slipping, his hand shaking as he kept the gun pressed to Veronica's head. "You're lying. All of you are lying." Kate took another step forward, her hands visible and empty. "It's over, Pierce. Your Russian handlers have already disavowed you. There's satellite evidence of Spetsnaz units retreating from the perimeter. They're abandoning you." This final revelation broke something in Pierce. With a howl of rage, he shoved Veronica aside and raised his weapon toward Kate. Before he could fire, James moved with the lightning reflexes that had earned him his reputation. 3 precise shots rang out, and Pierce collapsed to the ground, his gun unfired. A collective exhalation swept through the crowd. Medical personnel rushed forward to secure Pierce and assess his wounds while others helped the shaken civilians. The air buzzed with shock, relief, and confusion as people tried to process what they had just witnessed. As medics rushed forward to secure Pierce and assess his wounds, Kate turned to find Veronica attempting to slip away in the confusion. With a swift movement, Kate intercepted her, twisting Veronica's arm behind her back and forcing her to her knees. "Not so fast, Mrs. Pierce," Kate said quietly. "We have a lot to discuss about your activities at West Point and after." Veronica's defiance crumbled as she realized there was no escape. The perfectly composed, ice-cold manipulator was gone, replaced by a frightened woman who suddenly understood the full consequences of her choices. "They'll come for me. Moscow protects its assets," she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. "Not the ones who fail so spectacularly," Kate countered. "You're on your own now." There was a moment when their eyes met, and Kate saw something unexpected, a flicker of relief behind Veronica's fear, as if some part of her welcomed the end of the deception, the chance to stop running and hiding. "I never wanted it to go this far," Veronica said softly. Her words meant only for Kate. "They recruited me when I was just a cadet, ambitious, angry at the system. It seemed like a game at first." Kate studied her, seeing for the first time the woman behind the asset. "Games have consequences, Veronica. 16 men died in Kandahar." "I didn't know about that," Veronica insisted, a hint of desperation in her voice. "Pierce handled the military operations. I was his cover, his access to social circles. I never wanted anyone to die." Whether this was truth or another manipulation, Kate couldn't tell. But she recognized the universal human desire to be seen as something more than one's worst actions. "Tell that to the families of the dead," Kate replied, but her voice held less edge than before. "Maybe cooperating fully will count for something." As federal agents moved in to take custody of Veronica, Kate finally turned to face her husband. For a moment, they maintained professional distance, aware of the eyes upon them. Then James closed the gap between them, protocol forgotten, as he pulled her into a tight embrace. "You're bleeding," he murmured, noticing the wound on her shoulder. "Just a graze," Kate replied, suddenly aware of how exhausted she felt now that the adrenaline was fading. "You're late." James smiled, the stern commander momentarily replaced by the man only she knew. "Traffic was hell, and someone had to clean up the Spetsnaz team waiting to ambush us." Around them, order was being restored. The SEALs had secured the command center and rescued the Secretary of Defense. FBI agents were taking custody of Pierce's Russian operatives, while military police detained the security personnel who had knowingly participated in the plot. The base personnel, who had witnessed the entire scene, were still processing what had happened. Some approached Kate with newfound respect, offering brief nods of acknowledgement or quiet words of apology for underestimating her. Others maintained a respectful distance, still adjusting to the revelation that the gentle art teacher had been a highly trained intelligence operative in their midst all along. Admiral Thompson, released from his confinement, approached them with grim satisfaction. "Well done, both of you, though I could have done without the theatrical staging." "Sorry about that, sir," James replied. "We needed Pierce to believe he had the upper hand." "And the zipper net breach?" Thompson asked, concern evident in his voice. "Contained," Kate assured him. "The NSA implemented the honeypot protocol as soon as we confirmed Pierce's intentions. The Russians accessed a simulated environment with carefully crafted disinformation." Thompson nodded, relieved. The secretary wants to speak with you both once the situation is fully secured. I believe commendations are in order." As Thompson moved away to coordinate the recovery efforts, James turned back to Kate, his expression softening. "So much for your quiet assignment teaching art to military kids." Kate smiled wearily. "I was actually enjoying it, believe it or not. The children were healing, in a way." James understood without further explanation. Their work had exposed them to the darkest aspects of humanity. Finding light in teaching children had been a rare respite for Kate. "Maybe you can continue," he suggested, "after all this dies down." "Maybe," Kate agreed, though they both knew their skills would soon be needed elsewhere. "For now, let's finish securing the base. Pierce mentioned other operatives we haven't identified yet." James nodded, the professional mask sliding back into place. "My team is already conducting sweeps. We'll find them." As they moved toward the command center to coordinate the ongoing security operation, Kate glanced back at the flagpole where Rodriguez had been suspended. A detail of Marines was raising the American flag, once more restoring proper protocol, and symbolically reclaiming the base from those who had betrayed it. The worst was over, but Kate knew the real work was just beginning. Pierce's network would need to be dismantled, his Russian contacts identified and neutralized. And somewhere in Moscow, the masterminds behind this operation were already planning their next move. But for now, she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. She had maintained her cover long enough to expose a traitor, prevented a catastrophic intelligence breach, and survived to fight another day. In her world, that counted as a win. And James was home at her side once more. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The sun had begun its descent over Camp Pendleton as military police established a secure perimeter around the base. FBI counterintelligence teams worked methodically, detaining Russian operatives and securing evidence of the elaborate plot. At the center of this controlled chaos, Catherine and James Winslow coordinated the effort from the command center they had reclaimed from Colonel Pierce's conspirators. "We've secured the communications hub," reported Lieutenant Jenkins, one of James's trusted SEAL team members. "The Russian equipment has been isolated and preserved for NSA analysis." James nodded, studying the tactical display showing the status of all teams across the base. "And the Secretary of Defense safely evacuated to MKS Miramar," Kate answered, ending a call with her CIA handlers. "His security detail has been vetted and replaced with trusted personnel." The immediate crisis had been contained, but both Kate and James knew their work was far from complete. Pierce had been stabilized by medical personnel and taken into federal custody, but the information they needed about the broader conspiracy remained locked in his head. "Any word on the Spetsnaz units that retreated from the perimeter?" James asked, his scarred face illuminated by the blue glow of the tactical screens. "Satellite tracking lost them in Los Angeles," Kate replied. "They're likely using pre-established extraction protocols to leave the country." As they spoke, Sergeant Major Miller entered the command center, his weathered face showing the strain of the day's events, but his posture remaining proudly military. In his hands, he carried a damaged laptop, recovered from Colonel Pierce's office. "You might want to see this," Miller said, placing the computer on the central table. "Tech team managed to bypass the encryption. Pierce wasn't just compromising this base. He had detailed files on 3 other installations along the West Coast." Kate activated the computer, quickly scanning through the recovered files. Her expression darkened as she grasped the full scope of Pierce's betrayal. Naval Base, San Diego Naval Air Station, Lemoore Joint Base, Lewis McChord. She listed grimly, each with identified Russian assets in place waiting for activation orders. James studied the intelligence with the calculated precision that had made him legendary among special operators. This isn't just an intelligence operation. It's the groundwork for something bigger. A coordinated strike, Kate agreed, the analyst, in her instantly recognizing the pattern. Disable America's Pacific command and control capability in preparation for what? The question hung in the air until Admiral Thompson entered, accompanied by Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, who had refused medical evacuation despite her injuries from Pierce's brutal treatment. Taiwan, Thompson said without preamble, having overheard their discussion. Naval intelligence just reported unusual movement from China's Northern Fleet. If Russia helps disable our Pacific response capability, China could move on Taiwan before we could effectively respond. James finished, immediately grasping the strategic implications. When did the fleet movement begin? Approximately 12 hours ago, Thompson confirmed. Right when Pierce was planning to activate his network. Kate's mind raced through the connections. This isn't just a Russian operation. It's a coordinated Russian-Chinese effort to create a window of opportunity in the Pacific. And we've only stopped one piece of it, James added grimly. The command center fell silent as the true stakes became clear. What they had uncovered at Camp Pendleton was merely one node in a much larger conspiracy that threatened global stability. James turned to his team. Jenkins, coordinate with FBI to expedite interrogation of the captured Russian operatives. We need to identify every asset in Pierce's network immediately. Yes, sir, Jenkins replied, already moving toward the communication station. Rodriguez, James continued, work with naval intelligence. I want real-time updates on the Chinese fleet movements. Despite her injuries, Rodriguez straightened. On it, Commander. Kate was already ahead of them, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she correlated data from multiple intelligence sources. Pierce's files mention a contingency protocol called Crimson Tide. If the primary operation failed, secondary teams would target critical infrastructure. Time frame, James asked sharply. Kate's expression was grim. Immediate activation upon primary mission failure. Which means they're already moving, James concluded. As if confirming their worst fears, the tactical display suddenly lit up with multiple alerts. Security breaches were being reported at electrical substations serving Naval Base San Diego, and communications disruptions had begun at Joint Base Lewis McChord. They're cutting power and communications to isolate our response capabilities, Kate observed. Classic opening move for a coordinated attack. James didn't hesitate. Admiral Thompson, we need to implement full defensive protocols at all Pacific installations. Miller, coordinate with base security to lock down any remaining vulnerability points here. As the men moved to execute these orders, Kate pulled James aside, lowering her voice. The files mention a primary control agent, someone above Pierce who coordinates the entire West Coast network. A name? Just a code Vanguard. Kate's expression was troubled. But there's something else. The communication protocols suggest this person has high-level military access, possibly Pentagon level. James absorbed this with the stoic calm that had carried him through countless high-stakes operations. We need to move on the other bases immediately. If we can capture the secondary teams, we might identify Vanguard. Kate nodded in agreement, but her tactical mind was already formulating a different approach. Or we make Pierce believe he still has a chance to complete his mission. Use him to draw out Vanguard. A slow smile spread across James's face, the dangerous smile his enemies had learned to fear. Psychological warfare. Your specialty. I learned from this best, Kate replied, remembering her father's expertise in turning enemy assets. Pierce is arrogant. His ego won't allow him to believe he's completely failed. Within 30 minutes, they had formulated a plan and secured approval from both CIA and Naval Special Warfare Command. Pierce, under guard at the base medical facility, would be allowed to believe that certain elements of his operation had succeeded. Under carefully controlled conditions, he would be permitted to make one secured communication to his handler, attempting to salvage his mission and reputation. Kate watched through one-way glass as James entered Pierce's room. The wounded colonel lay handcuffed to his bed, his shoulder bandaged where James's bullets had struck him. Despite his situation, Pierce's face remained defiant. "Come to gloat, ghost," Pierce sneered, using James's operative name with contempt. James pulled up a chair beside the bed, his demeanor calm and professional. "I'm not interested in gloating, Pierce. I'm interested in understanding." "Understanding what?" "How it feels to know you've been living a lie, that your country has been selling itself out to the highest bidder for decades." Pierce's voice carried the fervor of a true believer, or someone who had convinced himself of his own propaganda. "I understand ideology," James replied evenly. "What I don't understand is why you'd compromise operational security at the Kandahar extraction. 16 men died, Pierce. Good men." A flicker of something, perhaps regret, perhaps pride, crossed Pierce's face. For a moment, the colonel's eyes darted away as if unable to meet James's steady gaze directly. "Casualties of a larger war. You SEALs think every mission exists in isolation. You never see the bigger strategic picture." The conviction in his voice wavered slightly, betraying an undercurrent of doubt. "And what picture is that?" Pierce laughed bitterly, but there was a hollow quality to it. "The one where America is already losing. China and Russia are ascendant. I chose the winning side." "And yet here you are," James observed calmly, "while your Russian friends are running for the border." Pierce's jaw tightened, his fingers clenching the hospital sheet. For a brief moment, his carefully constructed narrative seemed to waver. "You don't understand what's at stake. America has grown soft, complacent. I needed to." He caught himself, the momentary vulnerability replaced by renewed defiance. "You think you've won." Pierce leaned forward as much as his restraints would allow. "You've stopped nothing. The operation continues without me. Vanguard has contingencies you can't even imagine." James allowed a calculated look of concern to cross his face. "We've already detained the secondary teams at San Diego and Lewis McChord. Your network is being dismantled as we speak." The momentary widening of Pierce's eyes told James their information about the secondary targets had been correct. "You're lying," Pierce said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. "The only installation we haven't secured is Lemoore." James continued feeding the carefully crafted misinformation. "Your team there went dark before we could intercept them." This was the bait, allowing Pierce to believe that one part of his operation remained viable, potentially salvaging his standing with his Russian handlers. Pierce struggled to maintain his composure, but James could see the calculations happening behind his eyes. The colonel remained silent, but his increased heart rate on the medical monitor betrayed his interest. "Here's what's going to happen," James said, leaning closer. "The FBI wants to transfer you to a black site for enhanced interrogation. No lawyers, no Geneva Convention protection. Traitors don't get the luxury of constitutional rights." "You're bluffing," Pierce challenged. "That's not how America operates." James's laugh was cold. "You think the Secretary of Defense, who you just tried to have killed, is feeling particularly constrained by legal niceties right now? This is being handled off the books." Fear finally broke through Pierce's facade. "I have rights. I demand legal representation." "Of course," James agreed smoothly. "You'll get a phone call before transfer. Standard procedure." The trap was set. James stood to leave, but Pierce called after him. "Ghost, what happened to Veronica?" For the first time, genuine emotion crossed James's face. Not anger, but something like pity. "She's cooperating. Told us everything about your recruitment. Your handler contacts the full network in exchange for witness protection." This was a calculated lie. Veronica had revealed nothing, maintaining the disciplined silence of a trained operative. But the implication that his wife had betrayed him struck Pierce exactly as intended. "She's lying," Pierce insisted, a new desperation in his voice. "She doesn't know anything about the operational structure." His reaction revealed more than his words. Beneath the bravado was a man who had gambled everything on a cause that had abandoned him, whose closest ally had supposedly turned against him. For a brief moment, Pierce looked like what he truly was, a middle-aged man who had destroyed his life and career for a fantasy of power and recognition that would never materialize. James shrugged. "Maybe, but the CIA finds her credible enough to offer a deal." He paused at the door. "You'll get your phone call in 20 minutes. Make it count." Outside the room, Kate waited with a small team of intelligence specialists and technical experts. "He took the bait, completely," James confirmed. "His ego won't allow him to believe Veronica succeeded where he failed. He'll make the call." The next 20 minutes were a flurry of technical preparations. The phone Pierce would be provided had been extensively modified, capable of tracking any response to impossible depths while appearing to be a standard secure line. When Pierce made his call, Kate and James watched from the monitoring room as the colonel used a memorized sequence of code phrases that even the most sophisticated voice recognition systems would have difficulty identifying as operational communications. The package was delivered, but the weather turned unexpectedly, Pierce said into the phone, his voice steady despite his situation. "Local forecast shows clearing at Lemoore, but storms everywhere else." The response came through a heavily disguised voice. "Confirmation required on Lemoore status. Authentication protocol Sierra 9. Pierce hesitated only briefly. "Authentication Crimson Bravo 7 Delta. Request extraction protocol for compromised asset." "Negative on extraction," the voice replied. "Complete Lemoore objective first. Confirmation will secure your position." The call ended abruptly, but Kate's team had what they needed. The CIA's most sophisticated signal intelligence systems had been tracing the call from the moment it connected. "Triangulating source location," reported a technical specialist, his fingers moving rapidly across his keyboard. "Bounced through multiple proxies, but we're narrowing it down." Kate and James exchanged a look of grim satisfaction as the specialist announced, "Got it. Pentagon's Secure Communications Sector. Specific office identified." The name that appeared on the screen struck them both into momentary silence. "General Lawrence Harding," Kate read aloud, "Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff." "Vanguard," James confirmed softly. Admiral Thompson, who had been observing silently, spoke up. "Harding has access to every operational plan for the Pacific Theater. If he's compromised, then we need to move immediately," James said decisively. "But carefully. If Harding realizes we've identified him, he could activate emergency protocols we don't know about." Kate was already coordinating with CIA headquarters. "Langley is implementing Operation Shadowbox. Harding will be contained without alerting him that he's been compromised." Within hours, a joint FBI-CIA team had quietly taken General Harding into custody while he attended a budget meeting at the Pentagon. Simultaneously, special operations teams secured the Naval Air Station Lemoore, capturing the Russian team that had been standing by for activation orders. The sophisticated conspiracy that had threatened American military readiness in the Pacific had been neutralized. By the following morning, Chinese naval forces had mysteriously reversed course, returning to their home ports without explanation. Back at Camp Pendleton, Kate and James supervised the final security sweeps, ensuring no trace of Pierce's network remained active on the base. As the immediate crisis subsided, the personal cost of their victory began to make itself felt. Kate's shoulder wound, though minor, throbbed with increasing intensity as the adrenaline faded. In a quiet moment alone in the command center, James gently examined her injury. "You should have had this properly treated hours ago." Kate managed a tired smile. "There were more important matters to attend to." "Nothing is more important than you making it home in one piece," James replied, his voice carrying the weight of too many close calls over too many years. "Says the man who once completed a mission with 3 broken ribs and a bullet lodged in his thigh," Kate countered, but she allowed him to clean and properly dress the wound. "That was different," James insisted. "How so? I didn't have you waiting for me back then." The simple statement contained volumes. Before they had found each other, both had approached their dangerous professions with a reckless disregard for personal safety. Having someone to return to had changed them both, in subtle but profound ways. Their moment of connection was interrupted by Admiral Thompson's arrival. "The Secretary of Defense is holding a classified briefing in 1 hour. You're both requested to attend." "Status on Pierce and Veronica?" Kate asked. "Both in federal custody, being transported to separate facilities," Thompson replied. "The Russians have already disavowed any knowledge of the operation. Officially, they're claiming Pierce was acting independently." "Of course they are," James said with a grim smile. "And Harding, singing like a canary from what I hear," Thompson said. 20 years of Russian recruitment and influence operations, all laid bare to save his own skin." Kate shook her head in disgust. "Men like Harding and Pierce never understand the concept of loyalty. Which is why they ultimately fail," James observed. "They can't conceive of people who place duty above self-interest." Thompson nodded in agreement. "The base will remain on elevated security status for the next 72 hours, but the immediate threat has passed. You've both done remarkable work here." After the Admiral departed, Kate allowed herself to sink into a chair, the exhaustion of the past several days finally catching up with her. "So much for my quiet undercover assignment teaching art." James smiled as he took the seat beside her. "I told you it wouldn't last. You're too good at what you do." "The children will be disappointed," Kate said, genuine regret in her voice. "Some of them were making real progress, especially the ones struggling with deployed parents." James studied her face, recognizing something he'd seen growing in her over recent years. "You liked teaching them, didn't you? Not just for the cover." Kate nodded, surprising herself with the admission. "They're so resilient even with everything they're facing, and art gives them a voice when words fail." "Maybe when this is all wrapped up you could continue," James suggested. "Not undercover, just as yourself. The CIA owes you some downtime after this operation." The idea was appealing, but Kate had been in the intelligence world long enough to know how things worked. "They'll have another assignment waiting before the paperwork on this one is filed." "Not if I have anything to say about it," James promised. "Even ghost operators are entitled to leave occasionally." 2 days later, the immediate crisis had been fully contained. The Russian-Chinese operation had been neutralized, Pierce's network dismantled, and General Harding's decades of treason exposed. Yet, for Kate and James, the most difficult confrontation still lay ahead. They stood together in an interrogation room at a secure federal facility in Virginia, watching through one-way glass as Colonel Pierce sat handcuffed to a metal table. Despite his situation, he maintained the rigid posture of a career military officer, his expression defiant. "You don't have to do this," James said quietly to Kate. The CIA has professional interrogators who can handle him. Kate's face was set with determination. This is personal, James. He needs to answer for Kandahar, for my father. The connection between Pierce and Thomas Winslow's death in Moscow had been confirmed through Harding's confession. Pierce had provided the intelligence that led Russian operatives to Kate's father in 2009, identifying him as a high-value CIA target. I understand, James nodded, but remember, he'll try to get under your skin. That's his only play now. Let him try, Kate replied, her voice steady and cold. When she entered the interrogation room, Pierce's expression flickered briefly with surprise, before settling back into calculated arrogance. Agent Winslow, he acknowledged, as she took the seat across from him. Or do you prefer Mrs. Ghost? Kate placed a file folder on the table between them but didn't open it. You know why I'm here, Colonel. Enlighten me, Pierce challenged. Is this the part where you offer me a deal in exchange for more names, because I've already told your colleagues everything I know? No, Kate replied simply. This is the part where you tell me about Thomas Winslow. Pierce couldn't hide his reaction to the name, a momentary widening of the eyes, a slight tensing of the jaw. I don't know who that is. My father, Kate clarified, her voice remaining professional despite the personal nature of the inquiry. Moscow 2009. You identified him to your Russian handlers as CIA ET station chief. And if that's what Harding told you, he's lying to save himself, Pierce deflected, but there was a new wariness in his posture. Kate opened the folder and removed a photograph, sliding it across the table. It showed a younger Pierce meeting with a known Russian intelligence officer in Beirut, dated 3 weeks before Thomas Winslow's death. Pierce glanced at the photo, then pushed it away. Circumstantial, he dismissed, though his confidence was visibly eroding. I met with many foreign officials during my diplomatic postings. This isn't a trial, Colonel, Kate reminded him. This is me asking you directly. Did you betray my father to the Russians? Pierce studied her face, perhaps searching for weakness or emotion he could exploit. Finding none, his expression shifted. Not to remorse, but to something more complex. For a moment, the facade of the hardened traitor cracked, revealing glimpses of the man he had once been. What if I did? He finally said, his voice lower, less confrontational. Thomas Winslow was an obstacle to necessary realignment of American foreign policy. His old Cold War mentality was becoming dangerous. He paused, then added with unexpected honesty, I didn't know he had a daughter. That wasn't in his file. The admission, so casually delivered, yet tinged with what might have been regret, sent a cold wave through Kate, but her expression remained unchanged. And the 16 men in Kandahar, were they obstacles too? Pierce's eyes darted away momentarily. Collateral damage, he said, but the dismissiveness seemed forced now. You intelligence types understand that concept, surely. Those were my husband's men, Kate replied. His brothers. For the first time, uncertainty crossed Pierce's face as he recognized the dangerous ground he was treading. It was nothing personal, just geopolitics. It became personal when you targeted my family, Kate said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. When you had my father killed. When you tried to have my husband's team eliminated. Pierce leaned back, attempting to project confidence he no longer felt. What do you want from me, Winslow? Remorse? You won't get it. I made my choices for what I believed was right. I don't want anything from you, Kate replied truthfully. I simply wanted you to know that everything you've built, everything you sacrificed your honor for, has crumbled. Your Russian handlers have disavowed you. Your wife is cooperating against you. Your legacy in the military will be that of the greatest traitor since Benedict Arnold. Pierce's facade finally cracked, raw anger breaking through. You think you've won. You and your self-righteous husband Russia and China are playing a longer game than America can comprehend. Today's setback means nothing in their strategic timeline. But beneath the bravado, Kate could see the truth. A man confronting the reality that he had thrown away everything for a cause that had abandoned him at the first sign of trouble. His eyes held the haunted look of someone who was beginning to question the choices that had led him to this point. Perhaps, Kate acknowledged, but you won't be around to see it. Treason during wartime still carries the death penalty, Colonel. She stood to leave, having gotten what she came for. Not information, but the simple satisfaction of looking into the eyes of the man who had betrayed her father and telling him his cause was lost. He said your name, Pierce called after her, a final attempt to wound. Your father, at the end, when they were interrogating him. He broke. Kate paused at the door, then turned back with a cold smile. No, he didn't. My father was subjected to 19 hours of enhanced interrogation by Russian intelligence. He revealed nothing. I know, because the FSB officer who conducted the interrogation is now in CIA custody. You can't hurt me with lies, Pierce. You've lost that power too. As she prepared to exit, Pierce called out once more, his voice stripped of its earlier arrogance, sounding suddenly old and tired. For what it's worth, Winslow, I didn't know they would kill him. I thought they just wanted to turn him. Kate stopped her hand on the door handle. Without turning around, she replied quietly, That's worth nothing, Colonel. Absolutely nothing. She left him sitting in stunned silence, the last of his psychological weapons neutralized, confronted at last with the human cost of his betrayal. Outside, James waited, his face a question. It's done, Kate said simply. He admitted to everything. James squeezed her shoulder gently. Did it help? Kate considered the question honestly. Not in the way I expected, but yes, I needed to look him in the eye, to see what kind of man could betray everything he swore to protect. And a small man, Kate concluded, deluded into thinking his treason was somehow noble. But in the end, just a man who made terrible choices and can't face what they've cost. James nodded in understanding. They always are, ready to go home. Home. Kate repeated the word, carrying unusual weight. After months of living undercover, the concept of returning to their real life together seemed almost foreign. Yes, I'm ready. Before they could truly return home, however, one final mission remained. The evidence recovered from Pierce's network had identified 3 deep-cover Russian operatives still active in sensitive positions within the U.S. military infrastructure. A joint CIA Naval Special Warfare Task Force was assembled to neutralize these remaining threats simultaneously. James would lead the team targeting a Russian asset embedded within the Submarine Development Squadron at Naval Base Kitsap in Washington. Kate was assigned to coordinate the operation from the Tactical Operations Center, her expertise in Russian intelligence methodology proving invaluable in planning the approach. Kingfisher is in position, James reported through the secure comm channel. Target is in the secure submarine design facility, moving to intercept. Kate monitored the operation from a bank of screens showing thermal imagery surveillance feeds and real-time positioning data of all team members. Confirmed. Cardinal and Osprey teams also in position at their respective targets. Execute on your mark, Ghost. The synchronized operation unfolded with precision. At exactly 0200 hours, all 3 teams moved simultaneously to apprehend the Russian assets before they could be warned or activate any destructive protocols. James's team encountered brief resistance, the Russian operative attempting to delete sensitive files before capture. The quick action of James's point man prevented any data loss, securing valuable intelligence on what submarine technologies had been compromised. By dawn, all three Russian operatives were in custody, and the immediate threat to American military security had been neutralized. The broader implications would take months to fully address. Compromised systems would need to be redesigned, security protocols overhauled, and trusted personnel revetted. In the aftermath, Kate and James finally received their debriefing at CIA headquarters in Langley. The director himself congratulated them on dismantling what he described as the most significant Russian intelligence operation on American soil since the Cold War. "The President has been briefed on your actions," the director informed them. "He's authorized me to offer you both any assignment of your choosing as recognition for exceptional service." James looked at Kate, a silent communication passing between them. After a moment, Kate spoke for both of them. "Sir, if possible, we'd like to request 6 months of operational stand-down. We've been running consecutive high-risk missions for over 3 years without significant downtime." The director raised an eyebrow. "That's an unusual request from either of you. Normally, you're both volunteering for the next hot zone before the debrief is complete." "Priorities change, sir," James explained simply. Understanding dawned on the director's face. "I see. Well, you've certainly earned it. Consider it approved, though I reserve the right to recall you if the world starts ending." "We'd expect nothing less, sir," Kate smiled. As they left the building, walking into the warm Virginia sunshine, James took Kate's hand, a rare public display of affection for two people accustomed to keeping their relationship compartmentalized from their professional lives. 6 months, he mused. What exactly do normal people do with 6 months of freedom? Kate laughed, the sound lighter than it had been in years. "I have no idea. Learn to cook something besides field rations, grow plants that don't die when we're deployed, sleep past 0500. "I was thinking we might visit Camp Pendleton," James suggested casually. "I hear they have an excellent art program for military children that's currently without a teacher." Kate looked at him in surprise. "You're serious?" "Why not?" James shrugged. "You enjoyed it. The kids benefited from it. And I could consult with the SEAL training program there, keep my hand in without deploying." The idea was unexpectedly appealing. After years of moving from one dangerous assignment to another, the prospect of doing something constructive, something healing, held a powerful attraction. "What about after the 6 months?" Kate asked. James considered this. "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Maybe by then we'll be ready to go back to the field. Or maybe we'll find something else that matters." 3 weeks later, Kate and James returned to Camp Pendleton under very different circumstances than when they had last departed. This time they arrived openly as themselves. Commander James Winslow, decorated SEAL team leader, and Catherine Winslow, senior CIA operations officer. The base was holding a private ceremony to honor Sergeant Major Miller, who had been critically wounded while helping to capture one of Pierce's Russian operatives during the final security sweep. Though the doctors had initially feared the worst, the tough old soldier had defied their predictions and was now recovering, though he would never return to active duty. The ceremony was being held in the base hospital's rehabilitation garden, where Miller was making his first attempt at walking with prosthetic support. When Kate and James arrived, they found Admiral Thompson already there, along with Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez and several other officers who had stood against Pierce's conspiracy. Miller's face lit up when he saw them. "Well, look what the tide washed in the ghost, and his shadow in person and in public. Never thought I'd see the day." James grinned as he shook the older man's hand. "Figured it was time to step out of the shadows, Sergeant Major, at least for a while." And just in time, Thompson added. The Secretary of Defense will be arriving shortly to present your commendation personally. Miller waved this away with typical modesty. Fuss over nothing. Just did what needed doing. You saved lives, Frank, Kate said warmly, including mine. The older man's eyes softened. Your father would have expected nothing less. Thomas saved my hide more times than I can count. Watching over his daughter was the least I could do. Around them, the garden filled with military personnel and their families, all there to honor Miller's service. Among them were many of the children from Kate's art classes, accompanied by parents who now looked at her with newfound respect and in some cases a touch of awe. One young girl broke away from her father and ran to Kate, wrapping her arms around her waist. Ms. Winslow, are you coming back to teach us? Kate knelt down to the child's level. I'm hoping to Emma. Would you like that? Yes, the girl exclaimed. Daddy says you're a real-life superhero, but I told him you were already my hero because you taught me how to draw horses. Kate glanced up at Emma's father, a Marine captain who had once been dismissive of her frivolous art program. He gave her a respectful nod, his expression conveying a silent apology for underestimating her. Well, I think art teachers can be heroes too, Kate told the girl with a smile. The ceremony itself was brief but moving. The Secretary of Defense presented Miller with the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest military decoration for extraordinary heroism. In his remarks, the Secretary acknowledged the unnamed threat that Miller and others had helped neutralize, carefully avoiding any classified details while making clear the significance of their actions. The American people may never know the full extent of what transpired here, the Secretary concluded, but those of us who do will forever be grateful for your courage and sacrifice. After the formal presentations, a small reception allowed for more personal conversations. Kate found herself approached by several of her former art students and their parents, all eager to know if she would return to teaching. Before Kate could answer, Admiral Thompson joined them. Actually, that's something I wanted to discuss with you, Mrs. Winslow. Our community center is still without an art teacher, and these children have made it clear that no substitute will do. Kate glanced at James, who had overheard the conversation. He nodded encouragingly. I'd be honored, Admiral, Kate replied. Though I should warn you, I'll be teaching under my real name this time. Thompson smiled. I think we can handle that. And Commander Winslow, the SEAL training facility has requested your expertise as a tactical consultant. Seems your reputation precedes you. James accepted with a nod. Happy to contribute, sir. As the children excitedly discussed future art projects with Kate, Rodriguez approached with a more serious matter. I've been appointed to the committee investigating the full extent of Pierce's network, she informed them quietly. We're finding connections that go back decades. This wasn't just about military intelligence. It was about reshaping American strategic thinking from within. The Russians have always played the long game, Kate acknowledged. Plant the seeds, nurture them over years' harvest when the time is right. We'll be more vigilant now, Rodriguez assured her. Thanks to you both. As the gathering began to disperse, Kate noticed Veronica Pierce's name hadn't been mentioned once during the entire ceremony. What happened with Veronica? She asked Rodriguez quietly. Rodriguez hesitated before answering. Full cooperation. She's provided intelligence on at least a dozen other Russian assets in various government positions. In exchange, she'll enter witness protection after the trials. Do you think she's genuine? Kate asked, remembering the moment of vulnerability she'd glimpsed in Veronica's eyes. The intelligence community is divided, Rodriguez admitted. Some think she's playing another angle. Others believe Pierce's willingness to sacrifice her was a wake-up call. Either way, she'll be monitored for the rest of her life. Kate nodded thoughtfully. People like Veronica were complex, neither wholly villainous nor easily redeemed. Perhaps, in witness protection removed from the pressures and manipulations that had shaped her choices, she might find a different path. As the reception wound down, Miller called James and Kate to his side for a private word. "I've been going through some old things during my recovery," he said, handing Kate a small weathered envelope. "Found this among your father's effects that were sent to me after Moscow. Never had the right moment to give it to you before." Kate accepted the envelope with trembling hands, recognizing her father's handwriting on the outside. "For Catherine, when the time comes." "He gave it to me just before that last mission," Miller explained. "Said if anything happened to him, I should hold on to it until you were ready." Kate carefully opened the envelope, extracting a single photograph and a brief handwritten note. The photo showed her father standing beside a much younger Miller, both in civilian clothes, but unmistakably on an operation. On the back, her father had written, "Berlin, 1983. The good fight continues." The note was simple but profound. "Catherine, if you're reading this, I've fallen in a battle that began long before you were born. Do not seek vengeance for me, but justice for all who would be harmed by those we fight. Remember that in our line of work, victory is never final, and the truest victories are the ones history never records. Find people you can trust absolutely. I found him too few in my lifetime. I hope you find more. With all my love and pride." Dad, Kate, read the note twice, then carefully returned it to the envelope. "Thank you, Miller. This means more than I can say." The old soldier nodded, understanding in his eyes. "He'd be proud of you, Kate. Of both of you. You've continued the good fight, just as he hoped." The sun was setting over the Pacific as Kate and James walked along the shoreline of their beachfront property. 1 month had passed since their return to Camp Pendleton, and they were gradually adjusting to a life not dominated by immediate life-or-death operations. Kate had fully embraced her role at the community center, expanding the art program to include therapeutic sessions for veterans dealing with PTSD. James divided his time between consulting at the SEAL training facility and working with a nonprofit organization that helped special operations veterans transition to civilian life. Their home, once primarily a cover location maintained by the CIA, was slowly becoming a true reflection of themselves. The hidden room with its surveillance equipment and weapons cache remained. Some habits and precautions were too deeply ingrained to abandon, but the rest of the house had transformed into a warm, personal space. "Rodriguez called today," Kate mentioned as they walked barefoot along the wet sand. "Pierce's trial has been set. Closed proceedings, of course." James nodded, unsurprised. "And Veronica, witness protection after providing evidence against several other Russian assets. She'll disappear into a new identity somewhere." Kate paused. "She asked if I would meet with her before she goes." James looked surprised. "Are you going to—" "I haven't decided," Kate admitted. "Part of me thinks she's just manipulating the system again, but another part wonders if she's genuinely trying to make amends." "What would your father advise?" James asked gently. Kate smiled, thinking of the note she now kept in a locket around her neck. "He'd probably say that understanding your enemy doesn't mean forgiving them, but it might help prevent creating new ones." "Wise man." James nodded. "Whatever you decide, I support you." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, watching the waves crash against the shore. Finally, James voiced the question that had been on both their minds. "Do you miss it? The field work? The operations?" Kate considered this honestly. "Parts of it. The clarity of purpose. The knowledge that what we did mattered in immediate, tangible ways." She paused, looking out at the horizon. But I don't miss the cost. The constant vigilance, the lives lost. The children you're teaching now, James observed. That matters too, maybe in ways we can't fully measure yet. Kate smiled, leaning against his shoulder. That's what my father's note made me realize. The good fight isn't just about eliminating threats. It's about building something worth protecting. As darkness fell over the ocean, they turned back toward their home where lights glowed warmly in the windows. The secure phone in James's pocket remained silent. No emergency recalls, no urgent missions requiring their unique skills. For tonight at least, the world would have to manage without the ghost and his shadow. 6 months, James mused, echoing their conversation at Langley. Think we'll make it the full term before one of us gets restless? Kate laughed. Probably not. But that's tomorrow's problem. As they reached their porch, Kate paused to look back at the darkening beach. Somewhere out there, she knew other threats were forming, other adversaries planning. The game never truly ended. The players merely changed. But for now, she and James had earned their respite. They had exposed traitors, protected their country, and honored her father's legacy. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them together as they always had. "Coming inside?" James asked, holding the door open. Kate turned away from the darkness, stepping into the light of their home. "Yes, I'm home,"